Hello everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Thanks for being here for another video. If you enjoy the stories tonight, please give the video a like, and if you've had an unexplained experience of your own, feel free to send it to me. We're starting with a story from someone who was home alone one afternoon, walking through a hallway they knew very well, when they suddenly saw something at the top of the stairs that didn't make sense. Let's get into the first story, and I hope you all sleep well tonight. So, this happened around 4 years ago, during the summer after I finished high school early. I had graduated in January, and honestly, I was in this strange, empty pocket of life. I didn't have a job yet. I didn't have a car. I didn't really have responsibilities pulling me anywhere. Most days, I was home alone, just kind of drifting through the hours. And one habit I picked up, for whatever reason, was pacing the upstairs hallway. I mean pacing for hours, not 10 minutes, not a little walk back and forth. I'm talking most of the day, sometimes 12 or 13 hours, just walking from one end of the hall to the other. Because of that, I got really familiar with that hallway. I knew what every shadow looked like at noon, what changed when the sun moved, what shapes appeared in the corners of my vision. I knew how the light hit the walls, the doors, the stairs. So when something looked wrong, I noticed. That day, my phone was charging in another room, so I didn't have anything distracting me. It was the middle of the day. The upstairs was bright. Nothing about the house felt creepy. It was just quiet. The layout was simple. The stairs came up to the second floor facing a bedroom door. Then, when you turned right, the hallway stretched down toward the other rooms. I was near the far end of the hall when I turned around, and I stopped. Actually, I think I stepped back a little. It felt like I wasn't fully inside the moment anymore. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like I was suddenly watching the hallway instead of standing in it. Then my vision changed. The best way I can describe it is this. Imagine someone placing a clear plastic sheet over a bright photograph. Like those old classroom projectors, where the teacher would write on the plastic layer, and it looked like the writing was on the worksheet underneath, even though it wasn't. That's what it felt like. Like the real hallway was still there, completely normal, but another image had been placed over it. And at the top of the stairs, right where the staircase opened into the hallway, there was a dog. At least, it had the body of a dog. It looked like it had been walking up the stairs and paused halfway, with its front paws already on the second floor and its back legs still a few steps below. But the face was human. Not vaguely human, not just kind of weird. It had the full face of a man, and the strangest part was that it didn't look threatening. It didn't look startled either. It looked annoyed. It stared at me like someone who had been trying to sleep downstairs and got woken up by me pacing back and forth all day. Not furious, not evil, just tired and irritated, like, really? Still walking? We looked at each other for maybe 5 seconds, and I could see it clearly, but still through that strange, layered feeling, like it wasn't fully part of the house, even though it was right there. Then, just as suddenly, I became fully aware of the hallway again, and it was gone. There was no sound, no movement, no explanation. I didn't have pets. Nobody else was home. Nothing could have come up those stairs and disappeared that fast. The weird thing is, I wasn't exactly scared. I was shocked, definitely. Confused, absolutely. But I didn't feel like I was in danger. Later on, the closest thing I could compare it to was a yokai I heard about. The one that's basically a dog with a human face. I didn't even know much about yokai at the time. My only real exposure had been from games and shows when I was younger, so this experience is actually what made me start looking into the folklore behind them. And that's what still gets me. I'm not Japanese. I wasn't in Japan. I had no real knowledge of that kind of folklore before this happened, so I don't know why I would have seen something like that, or whether it even makes sense to connect it to yokai at all. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe my brain glitched from too much pacing and too much isolation. Maybe it was something else entirely. I honestly don't know. But I know what I saw at the top of those stairs. And whatever it was, it looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see it. You know, when I was just about 10 years old, I had this nightmare. One of the most vivid, terrifying dreams I've ever had in my life. I was standing at the top of the stairs, saying goodbye to my parents. The house was quiet. That kind of quiet that makes every little creak sound louder than it should. Then, out of nowhere, I felt this presence behind me. I turned around slowly, heart thudding in my chest. And there it was, a huge, black, shadowy figure looming over me. It was massive, like it swallowed all the light around it. And the creepiest part? No matter how hard I tried to look at its face, I couldn't see any features. Just this endless blackness where a face should have been. I remember my voice trembling as I called out for my brother. He was the one who babysat me back then. But no one came. The figure started to raise its arm above me, and something deep inside me screamed that it meant harm. I yelled for my brother again, louder this time, and then I woke up. Cold sweat all over, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I'd never been so scared in my entire life, and yet, somehow, I found some small comfort in the fact that it was just a dream, just my imagination running wild. Fast forward a few months to Christmas of 2003. It was late, around 11 p.m., and I was coming downstairs to get a glass of water. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when everyone's been tucked away in bed for hours. As I passed the living room, the door was wide open, and of course, being a kid, I stopped to look at the Christmas tree. It was glowing softly, the twinkling lights casting gentle shadows across the room. My parents were upstairs asleep, and I could hear my brother in his room, the faint sounds of video games buzzing through the walls. I made my way to the kitchen, grabbed a drink, and on my way back, I paused again at the living room door. That's when I saw it. A tall figure sitting in the chair by the window, completely swallowed in shadow. My heart hitched in my throat. For a moment, I thought maybe it was my dad, out having a late-night cigarette, but the silence told me otherwise. I called out softly, "Dad?" No answer. The shadow just sat there, utterly still. Then, as I watched, I noticed the orange glow of the streetlight shining through the figure, like it was partly see-through. It was so surreal, I thought maybe I was dreaming again. I even pinched myself, the way kids do when they're not sure if something's real or not. Nothing changed. The adrenaline surged through me, cold chills crawling up my spine. I was terrified. Without thinking, I bolted for the stairs, nearly spilling the water all over myself. From the top, I looked back into the living room, and I saw the shadow stand up from the chair and start moving toward me. It moved like a man, but everything about it was wrong. The way it was transparent, the way it glided silently. I ran the rest of the stairs, almost tripping, and burst into my brother's room. He was still there, lost in his game. I just stood there, catching my breath, listening. Then I heard my dad cough from his bedroom upstairs. That's when I knew. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't either of the men in my house. That night, I shared my brother's room. He didn't complain, probably sensing how shaken I was. But I never spoke of the shadow. As time passed, I tried to push it out of my mind, convincing myself it was all in my head. Maybe just a trick of the light, or stress. Then, about a year ago, something happened that shook me all over again. I had a dream, or maybe a waking dream, around 5 a.m. The sun was just starting to stream through my window, casting golden light across my room. I was lying in bed, staring at my bedroom door, when I saw it. That same huge shadow figure, as tall as the door itself, with the outline of a head, shoulders, arms, and torso. No face, no features, just blackness, yet I could see the door through it, like it wasn't solid. My heart literally jumped into my throat. I shot upright and screamed, a scream so loud it must have echoed through the whole house. My dad came running in, clutching his hunting knife, panic on his face. "What, dream?" he asked, breathless. I nodded, still trembling, and sank back into bed. As the shock wore off, I started thinking about all those memories. The shadow in the living room, the nightmare from when I was a kid. I joked a bit in the following days about waking everyone up with my scream, but deep down, I was unsettled. Then, about 3 weeks later, when I was home alone late at night, between 11 p.m. and midnight, I had another terrifying experience. I was in the kitchen, standing by the sink, when I caught my reflection in the window. The lights were on inside, and outside it was pitch dark. And behind me, right there in the reflection, stood that same tall, lanky shadow figure. I could see the outline of its head, shoulders, and arms, just like before. I get chills even now just thinking about it. I spun around so fast, but there was nothing there. I looked back at the window, and there it was again, reflected behind me. Panic took over, and I bolted through the hallway, up the stairs, and into my room. I was desperate to grab my phone and call someone to come home. But as I reached for my phone on the vanity, this deep, guttural growl erupted from the hallway right outside my door. It was the loudest, most terrifying sound I've ever heard. I won't pretend I was brave. I dove straight into my closet and hid, heart pounding so loud I was sure it'd give me away. I stayed there for what felt like forever, maybe half an hour, before I finally felt brave enough to come out and turn on the lights. When people came back home, I felt a little safer, but sleep was impossible that night. My mind kept circling back to the shadow figure, the one from all those years ago in the living room. What if it was all connected? What if it was never just a dream? So, that's my story. The first time I've ever put it all down in one piece. I know it sounds crazy, maybe even unbelievable, but it's real to me. And I want to thank my brother for helping me remember these moments, and you for taking the time to listen. Sometimes, sharing these things makes the weight a little lighter. Hey, I want to share with you something that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. It happened a few years ago, and honestly, I'm not even sure if it really happened or if it was some vivid dream my mind cooked up. But the feeling it left me with, that's very real. So, picture this. I live in an old neighborhood in Chicago, not the bustling downtown, but a quiet, working-class area filled with these really old brick houses. They haven't been touched or remodeled in decades, which gives the whole place this timeless, almost forgotten vibe. It's the kind of neighborhood where the streets hold stories, even if no one talks about them anymore. One summer Saturday night, I went to bed pretty early. Normally there's not much happening around here after dark. No nightlife, just the occasional distant bark of a dog or a car passing by. That night, I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. And then, out of nowhere, I woke up. There was no noise, no disturbance, just me, wide awake in the dark. Now here's the strange part. I felt this urgent, strange pull inside me, something I had never felt before. I didn't question it. I just got up, threw on some clothes, and stepped outside. It was like some invisible force was guiding me, and oddly, it felt perfectly right, even though I had no idea what I was doing. As I reached my front stoop, I noticed something off. The streetlight right in front of my house was dimmer than usual, flickering softly. I glanced to my right. Every streetlight on that side was the same way, barely glowing. Then I looked left, down my block, and this is when things got surreal. The street itself, it was lowered, and smack in the middle of it was this massive tunnel entrance made of old, dusty bricks, about 10 feet tall. It looked like it had been there forever, forgotten and untouched. Normally, I'm not the type to be curious, but for some reason, I felt drawn to it. It was like the tunnel was calling me. As I got closer, I saw a huge pool of water stretching back into the tunnel, curving sharply to the right. The pool was lit from beneath, glowing with a soft, eerie light that made everything around it shimmer. The night was absolutely silent. No cars, no people, no lights on in any of the houses. It was like the world had gone silent, just for me. Despite the oddness, I decided to go in. I climbed into the pool. It wasn't deep, maybe 4 feet, so I could walk or swim if I wanted. I chose to walk, curious about what lay ahead. Minutes passed as I followed the water's path, the soft glow lighting my way through the tunnel. Then, I saw it. An exit, just like the entrance I'd come through. I stepped out of the water and onto the old brick road. But now, I wasn't in my neighborhood anymore. Trees surrounded me, dense and silent. Up ahead, there was a massive building, looking like an old banquet hall, or maybe an old circus tent, decorated with faded streamers and flags. The darkness pressed down around it, except for the warm, golden light spilling from its windows. Curiosity nudged me forward. I circled the building, finding an old stack of wooden crates beside a side door. Peeking inside, I saw a grand event happening. People dressed up, dancing and mingling like it was some kind of town ball or social gathering. The music was hauntingly beautiful, a strange blend of classical and country sounds I'd never heard before. Then, that strange urge hit me again. The feeling that everything was exactly as it should be, like I was being pulled by something beyond me. Against my better judgment, I stepped through the door near the crates, and suddenly, everything froze. The music kept playing, but every single person stopped moving mid-step. They all turned, slowly, in unison to look at me. Their faces were blank, hollow, almost cautious, as if I was an intruder in a world I didn't belong to. That moment snapped me back to reality. Fear crashed over me like a wave. I backed away slowly, heart pounding, then broke into a desperate sprint. I dashed through the doors, down the road, back into the tunnel. I didn't dare look behind me. The fear of what might be there pushed me forward. I plunged into the pool, swimming hard back the way I came. The glowing water was cold but comforting, guiding me safely out. When I finally burst out of the tunnel's entrance back onto my block, my breath caught in my throat. The tunnel was gone. Completely. The street was just a normal street again, with streetlights shining brightly and houses with warm lights on inside. It was like the whole thing had never existed. Still shaken, I ran inside and collapsed on my bed. My mind whirled with disbelief and exhaustion. I must have blacked out from the sheer anxiety and fatigue because the next morning, I woke up lying in bed thinking, what a horrible dream. But then, I noticed something that made my skin crawl all over again. My shoes were on, my clothes were still on, and my bed was soaking wet. Not just my pants, and no, I hadn't wet myself, but my pillow was drenched, like I'd just stepped out of a shower and hadn't dried off. Even my shoes were soaked. I've never forgotten that moment. That impossible mix of waking up to a strange reality where I was both in and out of that other place. I still don't know if it was a dream, some kind of alternate reality, or something else entirely. But whenever I walk outside at night and see that streetlight flicker, I wonder if that tunnel might still be waiting somewhere, just beneath the surface, for me to find it again. You know, I want to share this story that's been with me for years, stretching back to when I was just a little kid in the early 90s. We lived in this really old house, which was attached to the back of a general store. The whole place had been around since probably the late 1800s or early 1900s. You could feel the history in the air. The general store itself had this cellar out back, which back in the day was used for storing goods. But by the time my parents bought the place, the cellar had collapsed, so no one could get inside anymore. Local historians told us it was once used as a holding room for undertakers because it was cool down there, which always gave me chills just thinking about it. The house and store were always cold, no matter the season. It was like the walls held on to the chill of the past. I was around 4 or 5 at the time, and I never really felt alone in that house. One night, I woke up and saw this old lady sitting on the bed opposite mine. She was wearing a yellow dress, a really soft, faded yellow, like something from another century. I'd never met her, never seen her before, but there she was, just sitting there quietly. My little heart started pounding, and I hid under the blankets, whispering for my parents. When they came into my room, the lady was gone, just vanished like a flicker of a dream. I didn't talk about it for years. It felt too strange, too unreal. Later on, I found out that my mom had seen the lady in yellow too, and she wasn't the kind of person to make up stories or exaggerate. She was practical, down to earth. She told me once about seeing the lady standing at the end of our long hallway, just watching her as she cleaned the house. She said the lady stood there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, silently watching, before disappearing. And this was before I ever told her about the lady sitting on my bed. But there was one encounter my mom had that she says she'll never forget. See, around that time, this woman, we'll call her Sharon, started hanging around our family. She was trying to get close to my dad. I don't know all the details of what happened between them, but eventually, my parents divorced. One day, my mom confronted Sharon in our lounge. They got into a pretty heated argument, and my mom told her to leave, opening the front door and asking her to get out. As Sharon turned to leave, she stopped just at the door and started hurling insults at my mom. Then, something incredible happened. Sharon lifted a finger to point at my mom, and suddenly there was this massive gust of wind, like it came from inside the house itself, and a flash of yellow light. The next thing my mom remembers, Sharon was lying on the ground outside, pushed backwards right out the door. She was pale as a sheet, scrambled to her feet, and just ran off without saying a word. Only my mom and I ever saw the lady in yellow. My dad lived in the house for years after the divorce, and told everyone we were just making things up. My brother never saw her either. But I like to think that maybe my mom and I share a connection with the lady in yellow. Maybe we have some kind of gift, or maybe she chooses to show herself only to certain people. Whatever it is, I've always felt she was a protective spirit, watching over us quietly in that old, chilly house, ready to step in when we needed her most. Hey, I want to share something really personal with you, something that shifted my perspective in a way I never expected. It's about an experience I had with a psychic, someone I didn't believe in at all until this moment. So, let me set the scene for you. Earlier this year, in February, my dad passed away. It was heartbreaking, and honestly, it was the kind of loss that leaves a complicated ache. His death was tied to years of battling a severe alcohol addiction, something that had deeply affected all of us. I have 2 older sisters, and among us, my relationship with Dad was probably the toughest. The past wasn't easy. Back in the late 2000s, things took a really hard turn for him. There were so many things piling up. He had just lost his mom, which was a huge blow. My sisters were growing up and moving out, carving their own paths, while Dad was stuck in a job that no longer gave him satisfaction. Plus, financial struggles loomed heavy, especially since Mom didn't have employment benefits to ease the load. All these stressors seemed to push him further into drinking. For me, this was during the second half of middle school and stretched through high school. I didn't really know my dad as anything but a man weighed down by sorrow, someone who seemed like he had lost his will to fight. My sisters moved on with their lives, but I stayed home, caught in the storm of his neglect, and it was incredibly painful. Fast forward to September. Mom decided to make an appointment with a psychic, someone we had consulted before. The idea was to get a sense of the spiritual state of our family and maybe find some guidance on moving forward. So, me, Mom, and my sisters each went to see her one after the other at her home. Right when the psychic began the session, she mentioned feeling this incredibly heavy atmosphere, like an apology hanging in the air. She said this feeling didn't just appear when we arrived. It was already there, almost as if whatever caused it had walked in ahead of us. What struck her most was that the apology felt personal, directed at each of us individually. At first, that didn't seem too out there. But then she started sharing details that honestly sent chills down my spine. She talked about sensing a strong smell of alcohol, which made me think of Dad right away. Then she mentioned seeing something like blood clotting inside someone's body. It was unsettling, and my heart was pounding. She went further and said she could tell that Mom was the one who found Dad. She described how Mom had stopped just before opening the door, almost frozen by an instinct that something terrible had happened. The psychic said she could feel that hesitation, that gut-wrenching moment when Mom realized he was gone. But here's the part that really got me. The psychic said that the apology in the room was especially directed toward me. More than anyone else, even Mom. She emphasized this, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. At that moment, the numbness I'd been carrying faded away, and I was on the brink of breaking down right there on the floor. But somehow, I held myself together. I'm still not sure every single thing she said was perfectly accurate. After all, psychics are human too, and their messages can be a bit vague. But that feeling of apology, that had to be my dad. It fits so perfectly with the man he was deep down, the man I struggled to understand, but who must have carried so much remorse. That day changed something inside me. It brought a kind of closure I didn't expect, wrapped in a warmth and sorrow that felt so real. I wanted to share this with you because sometimes, even the things we doubt can hold truths that touch us deeply. Hey, I want to share something with you. Something a bit personal and, honestly, a little scary. It all starts with my fear of mirrors. Now, I know a lot of us, when we were kids, did the whole Bloody Mary chant thing. You know, locking ourselves in the bathroom, lights off, hoping not to see some ghostly figure staring back. My cousins and I definitely did that, giggling nervously and daring each other. But for me, that wasn't where my real fear began. No, it all started when my mom hung this big, golden-framed mirror in the hallway of our family home. It wasn't just any mirror. It was a gift she'd received after a relative passed away, and it quickly became one of her favorite things in the house. I remember it being so tall, with an ornate gold frame that had all these intricate designs carved into it. But to me, those designs looked wrong. Like they were forming angry faces, watching me. I'd tell my mom about it, how it made me feel uneasy, but she just laughed it off, saying I had an overactive imagination. The thing was, the mirror was positioned so that when I sat in the lounge watching TV, I could see it out of the corner of my eye, down the hallway to the left. And let me tell you, there was always this feeling, like the mirror was staring back at me, angry and alive. Most nights, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But then, the shadows started. At first, it was just subtle, like flickers from the corner of my vision, shapes darting across the glass. I'd glance over, heart pounding, but see nothing. Then one night, it got worse. I was sitting on the couch watching cartoons, the room dim and quiet except for the TV sounds. Suddenly, I heard it. My name, whispered so softly it sent chills down my spine. It felt like it was coming from the mirror itself. My stomach dropped, and every hair on my body stood on end. I slowly turned my head toward the hallway, my breath catching. And there it was, a figure or something glaring at me through the mirror. Its eyes burned into mine, full of hatred. For a terrifying moment, I just froze, wanting to scream or run, but unable to move. Then, without warning, the mirror crashed to the hardwood floor with a thunderous bang. I sat there, stunned and shaking, when suddenly I heard my mom's hurried footsteps rushing down the hallway. Her gasp filled the quiet, and she immediately knelt beside the shattered glass. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice sharp and scared. "Did you do this?" "No," I stammered, cheeks flushing with embarrassment and fear. "There was someone there. It just fell." Her tone didn't soften. She told me firmly there was no one else home, just the two of us. She said my dad had checked the mirror's hooks multiple times and it was secure. "Objects don't just jump off walls," she said, holding the now cracked mirror carefully. I remember the crack, a jagged line running straight down the center of the glass. It looked like the mirror itself was broken, scarred. Mom tucked the mirror under her arm, muttering about getting it fixed, and put it away in a closet. As for me, I was grounded that night for lying about a serious incident. I was angry, but also relieved I wouldn't have to face that mirror for a while. Not long after, my dad got a promotion that moved us to a new town. We left the old house and that creepy mirror behind. I never asked about it again, and for years, I didn't have any more weird experiences with mirrors. Until just a few months ago. Life was going great then. My husband and I had just bought our first house and were finally settling in. One evening, my mom came to visit, and I was so excited to show her how I decorated. She loved it. We spent the afternoon laughing and chatting, sipping coffee on the enclosed porch as the sun dipped behind the hills. When it was time for her to leave, I walked her to her car. Then, out of nowhere, she gasped, "Oh, I almost forgot." She reached into the back seat and pulled out a large package wrapped in shiny sky blue paper. "I couldn't come without bringing my baby girl a housewarming gift." I smiled, starting to tear the paper apart. But then, as the wrapping fell away, my smile froze. There it was, my reflection staring back at me, but framed by that same golden, creepy frame. The one I'd hated as a kid. "Do you remember it?" Mom asked, her voice warm and excited. "You loved it back then, and now it's time to pass this beautiful piece to you." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. "Yeah, I remember," I managed, though inside I was confused and uneasy. Where had she found it? Why was the crack gone? Did she not remember how much it terrified me? "It'll look gorgeous right in your entryway," she said, eyes sparkling. "Right above the side table you showed me." I forced a smile and nodded. I didn't want to upset her, not when she was so happy. "I have to run," she said, climbing into her car. "Send me pictures when you hang it, okay? Love you so much. I'm so proud of you." She blew me a kiss and drove off into the twilight. I stood there in the growing darkness, holding the mirror, feeling a cold knot of dread tighten in my chest. I had no idea what horrors awaited me in the weeks to come, but I knew one thing. This mirror was far from ordinary, and whatever was trapped behind that golden frame was waiting for me, watching, reflecting more than just my face. I was standing there at the stove, frying up some bacon, my mind just spinning in circles, when suddenly, I heard the front door open and close quietly behind me. It was that familiar sound, the one that always signals the end of a long day. "Honey, I'm home," my husband Mark called out with his usual warmth. I glanced up at the kitchen clock. It was exactly 10 p.m. Mark had been working late again, which, well, meant dinner was going to be late for us tonight. I wiped my hands on a towel, trying to shake off the unease that had settled deep in my stomach. As I walked into the entryway, there stood Mark holding that large, unsettling mirror. The way he looked at it, curious but cautious, it made my heart tighten painfully, and I felt bile rise at the back of my throat. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and intrigue. Trying my best to act casual, I said, "Nothing. Ready to eat? Breakfast for dinner." I plastered on a smile, but inside, I was anything but calm. Mark sniffed the air and grinned. Sure smells good. But come on, I know you too well. What's really going on with that weird mirror?" My smile faltered. All evening, I'd been wrestling with what to do about that cursed thing. I'd almost decided to smash it into tiny pieces in the backyard and then burn the shards until nothing remained. Until my phone buzzed with a text from my mom, reminding me to take pictures of it displayed in our home. So there it sat on the tile floor, leaning against the side table my mom had insisted was the perfect spot for it. As much as I hated to admit it, she was right. The mirror did look best there. "Mom came by," I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. "It's a housewarming gift." I shrugged and went back to the kitchen to plate our meals. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Your mom couldn't just write your name on a gift tag like a normal person?" I turned and saw him standing there, the creepy mirror still in his hands. "What?" I asked, still confused about what he meant. "She wrote your name on the mirror with, like, her finger or something," he explained, eyes fixed on the glass with an odd expression. I frowned and stomped over to see what he was talking about, my heart sinking as I caught sight of it. There, smeared across the mirror in what definitely looked like finger smudges, was the name Karlee. I felt all the blood drain from my face. That wasn't there just a few hours ago. I'd stared at that mirror for what felt like forever before bringing it in, its surface flawless, not a single smudge or spot. Even the crack I'd seen earlier had disappeared. "Babe, you good? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mark's voice cut through my trance. His face was etched with concern and confusion. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the creeping dread. "You know my mom, always doing weird stuff like that." I grabbed our loaded plates and headed toward the living room. I heard Mark set the mirror down on the kitchen floor behind me before following. Then his voice softened, serious now. "Carrie, what's going on?" I felt his hand gently on my shoulder as he turned me to face him after I set the plates on the coffee table. His eyes searched mine, and I could tell he was waiting for the truth. And honestly, I wasn't sure I had it myself yet. The mirror wasn't just a strange gift anymore. It was something else. Something I couldn't explain, but that I was beginning to fear. That night, as we sat together in the quiet glow of the living room lamp, the mirror stood looming in the corner, reflecting shadows that seemed to flicker just beyond the reach of the light. I tried to focus on Mark's calm presence beside me, but my mind kept drifting back to those smeared letters. My name, written with no explanation, no logic. I knew one thing for certain. This heirloom wasn't just cursed, it was alive, in a way I couldn't understand. And somehow, it was reaching out to me. You know, I was standing there at the stove, frying up some bacon, my mind just spinning in circles, when suddenly I heard the front door open and close quietly behind me. It was that familiar sound, the one that always signals the end of a long day. "Honey, I'm home," my husband Mark called out with his usual warmth. I glanced up at the kitchen clock. It was exactly 10 p.m. Mark had been working late again, which, well, meant dinner was going to be late for us tonight. I wiped my hands on a towel, trying to shake off the unease that had settled deep in my stomach. As I walked into the entryway, there stood Mark holding that large, unsettling mirror. The way he looked at it, curious but cautious, it made my heart tighten painfully, and I felt bile rise at the back of my throat. "What is this?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and intrigue. Trying my best to act casual, I said, "Nothing. Ready to eat? Breakfast for dinner." I plastered on a smile, but inside I was anything but calm. Mark sniffed the air and grinned. Sure smells good. But come on, I know you too well. What's really going on with that weird mirror?" My smile faltered. All evening I'd been wrestling with what to do about that cursed thing. I'd almost decided to smash it into tiny pieces in the backyard and then burn the shards until nothing remained. Until my phone buzzed with a text from my mom, reminding me to take pictures of it displayed in our home. So there it sat on the tile floor, leaning against the side table my mom had insisted was the perfect spot for it. As much as I hated to admit it, she was right. The mirror did look best there. "Mom came by," I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. "It's a housewarming gift." I shrugged and went back to the kitchen to plate our meals. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "Your mom couldn't just write your name on a gift tag like a normal person?" I turned and saw him standing there, the creepy mirror still in his hands. "What?" I asked, still confused about what he meant. "She wrote your name on the mirror with, like, her finger or something," he explained, eyes fixed on the glass with an odd expression. I frowned and stomped over to see what he was talking about, my heart sinking as I caught sight of it. There, smeared across the mirror in what definitely looked like finger smudges, was the name Karlee. I felt all the blood drain from my face. That wasn't there just a few hours ago. I'd stared at that mirror for what felt like forever before bringing it in. Its surface, flawless. Not a single smudge or spot. Even the crack I'd seen earlier had disappeared. "Babe, you good? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mark's voice cut through my trance. His face was etched with concern and confusion. I forced a laugh, trying to shake off the creeping dread. "You know my mom, always doing weird stuff like that." I grabbed our loaded plates and headed toward the living room. I heard Mark set the mirror down on the kitchen floor behind me before following. Then his voice softened, serious now. "Carrie, what's going on?" I felt his hand gently on my shoulder as he turned me to face him after I set the plates on the coffee table. His eyes searched mine, and I could tell he was waiting for the truth. And honestly, I wasn't sure I had it myself yet. The mirror wasn't just a strange gift anymore. It was something else. Something I couldn't explain, but that I was beginning to fear. That night, as we sat together in the quiet glow of the living room lamp, the mirror stood looming in the corner, reflecting shadows that seemed to flicker just beyond the reach of the light. I tried to focus on Mark's calm presence beside me, but my mind kept drifting back to those smeared letters. My name, written with no explanation, no logic. I knew one thing for certain. This heirloom wasn't just cursed, it was alive, in a way I couldn't understand. And somehow, it was reaching out to me. You know, when I was a kid growing up in a small town in the Philippines, I had this neighbor named Amelie. She was about my age, a slight girl with long, sleek black hair that fell straight down her back, and her skin was pale, much paler than most kids around me. I remember this so clearly because, back then, I was curious why she looked so different. One day, I asked my mom about her. She told me Amelie's fairness was probably because she was mestiza, mixed blood, and that she was hardly ever allowed to play outside. That made sense, especially since I only ever saw her peeking out from behind the curtains of her house's left front window. She never came out to play with us, the other neighborhood kids. And there was always this one thing that made her stand out even more: a yellow ribbon tied in a perfect bow around her neck. No matter what she wore, that ribbon was always there, bright and neat, which seemed so odd in the tropical heat we lived in. As the years went by, I caught glimpses of Amelie watching the street while we played outside. Sometimes I'd wave at her, hoping she'd wave back, but it just seemed to scare her. She'd disappear quickly, and I wouldn't see her again for days. The other kids called her a multo, a ghost, and warned me I'd be haunted if I tried to talk to her. But I never believed that. I just felt sorry for her and wanted to be friends. On my 7th birthday, I decided I wanted to bring her a piece of my birthday cake and invite her to play. I asked my mom if I could, but she was hesitant. She didn't know Amelie's parents and didn't want me going to some stranger's house. That's when I realized I'd never actually seen Amelie's parents come or go. Still, I insisted, told my mom that Amelie wasn't a stranger, but just someone I hadn't met properly yet. Eventually, she agreed. So, with a small plate holding a slice of mocha cake, I walked over to Amelie's house next door. The house was this old Spanish-style mansion, 3 stories tall, with big windows on each floor facing the street. Thick gray curtains covered every window, blocking any peek inside. The garden was empty, and huge iron gates blocked the sides and back. The only sign that someone lived there was Amelie herself, standing quietly in front of the left front window curtains. I waved to her, and before she could disappear, I held up the cake excitedly, pointing at it like, "Hey, look! Cake!" She paused, looked at me, then shyly pointed to the iron gate to the left. I walked over and saw there was a small hole in the gate where some bars had rusted away. Carefully, I squeezed through, holding the cake steady. Then, from a slightly open window on the side of the house, I saw a small hand waving. I made my way toward it and finally came face to face with Amelie. She smiled softly, took the plate from me, and then slipped back inside. From that moment, a friendship blossomed. Every week, I'd bring her something, a piece of cake, a candy, sometimes an ice pop when it got really hot. She always directed me to that same hole in the gate, and I'd carefully pass the treats through the partially open window. At first, she only said hi and thank you, but after some time, she started sharing bits about her life. She told me she was an only child. Her mother was often sick and bedridden, and her father was foreign. Whenever she mentioned her father, her voice would falter, and she'd look away. She was homeschooled by her mother, who mostly stayed in bed, so Amelie was never allowed outside. When I asked why, she said she had to care for her mom. That seemed fair enough. But there was one thing I was always curious about: the yellow ribbon around her neck. I asked a couple of times, but every time I did, the conversation would end abruptly. It was clear that was a subject she didn't want to talk about. This went on for almost a year, our quiet little friendship in the shadow of that old mansion. Then, on the night of my 8th birthday, I decided to bring Amelie the same mocha cake to celebrate our friendship. But when I got to the metal gate, Something was different. The hole in the gate was gone. New iron bars welded in place. I felt a flicker of worry, but walked back to the window where she usually stood. I waited, tapping gently on the glass. Seconds ticked by, and just as I was about to leave, I saw her, Amelie's small frame appearing in the window. My heart leapt with joy, but then I noticed tears streaming down her pale face. My excitement froze as she put a finger to her lips, signaling me to be quiet. She was silently crying, trembling. Slowly she reached behind her neck and untied the yellow ribbon. My stomach dropped when I saw what was underneath. There were dark purple bruises circling her neck, shaped like a noose, and in the center was a deep crimson slash across her skin. I couldn't scream. The horror was too much. Her tears mixed with the blood, running down her neck and chest. She opened her mouth as if to say something, maybe to apologize for scaring me, but only a gurgled whisper came out. We stood there, silent and broken, tears streaming down both our faces. Then, almost as if she were saying goodbye, she whispered a faint, "Thank you," slipped through the thick gray curtains and disappeared. I was frozen, my mind racing, heart pounding. Slowly, I staggered back home and forced myself to believe it was a terrible nightmare. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, the sound of police cars filled the street. News spread that Amelie's mother had died of natural causes, but her father had apparently slit Amelie's throat with a box cutter before taking his own life, hanging himself from the third-floor balcony. The news called it a murder-suicide, the tragic end to years of abuse. The house was cordoned off for about a week while the police investigated. When the scene finally cleared, I went back to Amelie's house to say goodbye one last time. As I approached the left front window, I noticed something on the ground near the broken glass. A perfectly kept yellow ribbon, just like the one Amelie always wore. I picked it up gently, tears welling in my eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Amelie. I'm so sorry. Goodbye." The ribbon felt like a fragile piece of her, a reminder of our friendship and the pain she carried so silently. Even now, when I think back to those days, I can still see her there, standing by that window, the golden ribbon tied tight around her neck, a fragile beacon of kindness amidst the shadows. Hey, I want to tell you about something that happened to me, maybe about a month ago now. It's still fresh in my mind, and honestly, it still creeps me out just thinking about it. So there was this problem with ants in my room. They were coming from this one wall that led straight outside. I was kind of freaking out because they were everywhere, so I decided to rearrange my room in a way that felt a little unusual. But it worked for a bit, and I thought it was just temporary anyway. My room is pretty big, with wooden floors and walls, and it's up on the second floor. Only 2 of the walls actually face the outside world. My bed used to be right under a window, facing out, but because of the ants, I moved it. And here's the thing, I didn't just move it to another wall like a normal person might. Nope, I put it smack dab in the middle of the room. Yeah, I know, it sounds weird, right? I was worried the ants might sneak in from the other walls too, even though that didn't really make sense. I was getting paranoid, honestly. So now, my bed is right in the center, and behind it, there's this bookcase. It's one of those cubicle-style shelves, not fully packed, but enough to hold some books, little trinkets, and random stuff. You can actually see through it from both sides because it's not solid, kind of like a divider. At first, I didn't think much about it. It seemed fine. But then, things started to get strange. The first night after moving was okay. I slept like a baby. But as the nights passed, something changed. I started getting less and less sleep. It wasn't like there was a specific noise or anything obvious. It was just that I couldn't fall asleep. I'd toss and turn endlessly, and mornings became brutal. Simple chores, homework, they all felt impossible. I felt exhausted and on edge all day. Then came the 10th night. That was the one that really shattered everything. I was tossing and turning, like usual, probably around 4 a.m. I could barely make out the clock on my wall because my room was nearly pitch black. No nightlight, no streetlight sneaking in, just darkness. Suddenly, I heard this soft shuffling sound coming from behind my bed, like the slow, careful movement of books or something else on that bookshelf. It was so quiet, it made my skin crawl. My eyes snapped open immediately. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when you think you hear something but no one else is supposed to be there? That's exactly what I felt. Every hair on my body stood up like I'd just been doused in ice water. No one else was in the room. We didn't have any rats or mice, and I definitely hadn't let any pets in there. So, what the hell was that noise? For a few seconds, I didn't move. I was frozen, trying to convince myself maybe I was just imagining things. It's 4 a.m. after all. Lack of sleep can mess with your head, right? I was desperately hoping that was the case. But the sound didn't stop. It kept going, slow, deliberate. I stayed still until my breathing started getting louder, and I let out a shaky, breathy exhale. Then, just like that, the noise stopped. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might burst out of my chest. I jerked my head up, every muscle in me tensed for fight or flight. I jumped out of bed and sprinted to the door. I opened it as fast as I could and bolted out of the room, not looking back once. I didn't see or hear anything on my way out, and honestly, I didn't want to. I walked my mom up and told her what happened. She reminded me about this weird clicking sound I used to hear when we lived in our old house, but I tried to explain this was different. She didn't really believe me, and honestly, I didn't blame her. I don't believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, but I had no idea what else it could have been. That night, she let me sleep in her room, but I barely slept at all. I just stared at the empty space next to the bed, drenched in sweat. My hair was soaked. I'd never felt fear like that before. It was all-consuming, like something out of a nightmare that refuses to end. The next night, I kept the light on for a little bit of comfort. I kept checking behind the bookshelf, making sure nothing was there, but sleep still wouldn't come. I was sweating again, and looking back, I probably should have just stayed with my mom again, or even pulled an all-nighter. But I convinced myself my mind was playing tricks on me. It was all too unreal. But then it happened again, and this time, it was worse. So much worse. I was just about to drift off, that hazy, dreamlike state right before sleep, where your thoughts get all jumbled and strange. My eyelids were heavy, and I felt weak. Then, the light went out. Instantly, every part of my mind snapped awake. Before I could even move, I heard that shuffling again, faster this time, like something was moving with more urgency. I didn't wait to hear more. I leapt out of bed and glanced toward the bookshelf. What I saw will haunt me forever. Behind the bookcase, hunched over, was something. I caught a glimpse of a discolored hand, long claws gripping the edge of the shelf. I couldn't see a face or even its full form, but whatever it was not human. It wasn't any animal I'd ever seen. I didn't hesitate. I ran. My heart was pounding so hard I almost tripped over my own feet as I bolted out of the room. I yelled for my mom as I rushed down the stairs, breathless and terrified. I told her everything, begged her not to go in alone, and we grabbed kitchen knives and flashlights together. I stayed close behind her the entire time. When we returned to my room, the door was closed, and the lights were on inside. We stepped in, shining our flashlights all around, but there was nothing. No mess, no moved books, no sign that anything had been there. It was like I'd never left. But I know what I saw. My mind didn't trick me. It was too real, too vivid. I still don't know what it was, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it's still there, watching from behind that bookshelf. was with my ex for almost 8 years, and by the end of 2021, I finally went completely no contact with him and his mother. And there's something important I need to explain first. His mother was my hairdresser, so she had access to my hair all the time. At one point, I found a small bag of my hair hidden away, and I also found little handmade dolls. Not regular dolls. They looked ritualistic, almost like something made to represent a person. When I was around 20, I was living with her and my ex. One night, I thought I heard something moving in the chimney, like maybe an animal had gotten trapped in there. I grabbed a light and looked inside, expecting to see a squirrel or a bird, but instead, I saw this black shape, almost like an orb, just sitting there in the dark. My mother practiced spiritually, so I knew enough to understand that what I was seeing was not normal. That night, I dreamed about it. Whatever it was, it felt aware of me. Not long after that, I moved out, ended the relationship, and went pretty far away. But the thing did not just disappear. It started showing up in dreams and in little moments that felt impossible to explain. In the dream, it looked almost fox-like, but wrong. Like it was bleeding darkness instead of blood. A few times at night, I saw what looked like red lightning flickering low to the ground. Every time it happened, this awful chill would run through me, and I would feel like I had to get inside immediately. One night, I was doing my hair in the mirror around 3 or 4 in the morning. Out of nowhere, I felt this sharp, searing pain in my back, right along my spine. At the same time, this horrible fear hit me so hard that I spun around in panic. I was so terrified that I actually peed myself. I still have a scar there. A little while after that, my stepsister, 2 of her friends, and I all saw it. By then, I had gotten sage and was trying to protect myself, but I was still young and honestly did not really know what I was doing. This thing was on all 4s, but its limbs were bent in ways that did not look natural. It had a long neck or head, and I remember thinking there might have been something like a horn on top. Some parts of it are clear in my mind, and other details are blurry because I was so scared. What I remember most is that it seemed to ooze darkness. It moved fast, almost skittering, and went under the trampoline while I was holding the sage. Somehow, I managed to seal it in a cellar, but eventually, that cellar was opened again. Later on, I got back together with my ex, and during the time we were together again, the entity stopped. Completely. It was just gone. Then we broke up for good in 2021, and when I cut contact with both him and his mother, it started again. Something banged on my bathroom window one night, and that same heavy dread came back. I ended up paying someone to do a cord cutting, and after that, things were quiet for a few years. Around that same time, though, my health started going downhill. I thought the cord cutting had worked, but now, I do not think it did. I have moved several times since then, so I know she could not have buried anything on my property. That is why I keep coming back to the hair. She had my hair. She had access to it for years. About a year ago, I found what looked like a claw mark high up on one of the windows. I know I should have blessed the house then, but I didn't. I think part of me was just trying to hide from it, spiritually speaking. Like if I stayed quiet enough, it would not notice me. But recently, it got worse. My husband and I started feeling watched from the backyard. Not just uncomfortable, watched. The whole area started to feel wrong. And then I felt it again. It came back. I did a polarization ritual on myself and my husband because I felt like it was trying to attach itself to him. I also blessed the entire property. Now I'm planning to burn a lock of my own hair and make it useless, so whatever connection exists through it can't be used anymore. But I need to ask, is there anything else I can do? I also want to be clear about something. I was told growing up that we have Cherokee, Apache, and Cree ancestry, but I have always identified as white on forms and in daily life. I do not want to appropriate Native culture in any way. That is not my intention at all. I have just tried every method I personally know, and because I believe this may have been sent by someone Native, I am wondering if that is why the non-indigenous spiritual work I've tried has not fully touched it. I'm scared. I'm tired. And I really need help. Hi everyone. I want to explain this gently before I ask my actual question, because the last time I posted about this, the focus went in a direction I really wasn't expecting. This is not about my dog's health or the way he eats. He's okay. He's not in pain, he's not scared, and nothing is wrong with his bowl. He has eaten this way since he was a puppy, whether I put his food in a bowl, on a paper plate, or on one of those little shallow dishes. Most of the time, I feed him from a plate because he has always liked tipping bowls over. Recently, though, someone gave us this sweet little bowl with his name on it, Milo, and I really wanted to try using it. So for the past few weeks, I've been working with him on keeping it upright, and that's why I was recording. I was just trying to document the progress. That's also why you can hear me saying things like, "Good boy," and "Thank you." I was encouraging him because he really has gotten better. He still does this funny thing where he grabs a bite, runs away, eats it somewhere else, then comes back for more. Sometimes he'll take a mouthful and drop pieces around like he's invented his own little snack scavenger hunt. He's just a goofy little guy. I've wondered if maybe it started because he was the smallest puppy in the litter and had to squeeze in between the others to grab food when they were all fed together. But again, that's not what I'm asking about. My question is about the strange sounds at the beginning of the video. Sounds I did not hear while I was recording. I want to explain something personal because it matters here. I am extremely sensitive to sound. Not just loud noises, but sudden or unfamiliar sounds too. A lot of that comes from being hypervigilant after childhood abuse and a long abusive marriage that I only recently got out of. Even when I'm asleep, the smallest sound can wake me. Loud noises always make me physically startle, even when I know what they are. So when people suggested it might have been a motorcycle or a loud exhaust outside, I understood why they said that. I really did. And I even told myself I could accept that explanation if it helped me stop worrying. But it still didn't feel right to me, because if a motorcycle or loud vehicle had passed while I was recording, my body would have reacted. It always does. I would have noticed it. I would have felt it. Some people also suggested my carbon monoxide detector might need new batteries, but I checked it, and it's working fine. What startled me was that I watched the video immediately after recording it, and when I played it back, I heard these strange, low, distorted sounds right at the beginning. To me, they sounded almost like guttural words. But while I was actually recording, all I heard was my fan humming softly, my dog eating, and the sound of me using my vape. And just to be clear about that too, because people were rude about it before, I vape because I used it to quit a 30-year, 2-pack-a-day cigarette habit. I'm down to a very low nicotine level now and tapering off completely. That's all it is. I didn't hear the strange sound and then forget about it. The video was short, and I played it back right away. It was not something I registered in the moment. I was also accused of being a bot in the other group, which I'm not. I'm just a person who got genuinely unsettled by something I heard on a recording and wanted to ask other people what they thought. I tried to explain everything up front because I didn't want my dog's eating habits to become the focus, and I didn't want to be ridiculed for being scared. So here's the actual question. I took this video about an hour before posting. While I was filming, I didn't hear anything unusual. My TV was muted, I live alone, and the only sounds I noticed were my dog eating and the faint hum of the fan in the background. But when I played it back, there were weird sounds at the beginning that honestly freaked me out. The louder slurping sound after that is just me hitting my vape, but the noises before it are what I'm asking about. They sounded dark and distorted to me, almost like something trying to speak. Then, right before I stopped recording, Milo suddenly reacted to the corner of the room like something was there, even though I couldn't see anything. Can you hear it too? What do you think it might be? Please be kind, even if your answer is that it was probably a motorcycle, a sound from outside, or that I'm overthinking it. I'm just trying to understand what I heard. I lived in the same apartment for almost 18 years. I grew up there, so in a lot of ways it was home. But even when I was little, before I knew how to explain fear or energy or anything like that, I used to have strange dreams about that place. It was a 3-story apartment with black metal railings, old patterned rugs, and a balcony that always felt a little too quiet. One of the living room walls had been painted a deep wine red years before, and the whole place had this heavy, almost watching kind of feeling. The 3rd floor was the worst. I still don't know how to describe it properly. It wasn't just creepy, it felt occupied, like the air up there had thoughts. My family used to joke that the apartment was haunted, but honestly, I don't think any of us really meant it as a joke. Every one of us experienced something there. For me, things would disappear all the time. Sometimes they were gone forever. Other times they came back in places that made absolutely no sense. One time, I was looking for this striped summer skirt I hadn't seen in ages. My friend came over and helped me search. We emptied my whole wardrobe. I mean, everything came out. Clothes on the bed, drawers open, piles sorted, folded, checked and checked again. The skirt was not there. Later that night, we were getting ready to go out. She had gone home for dinner, and we were FaceTiming while I picked something else to wear. I was still annoyed about the skirt, but I gave up. Then she came back to my apartment so we could have a drink before leaving. While we were talking, I opened my wardrobe one last time, and the skirt just fell straight into my arms. Not from the back, not from some hidden corner. It fell like it had been sitting right there the whole time. I used to hear scratching on doors, knocking, random sounds moving through the apartment. Almost every day I had this intense feeling that someone was watching me. Not once in a while, constantly. I never felt truly alone there. I heard footsteps when nobody else was home. I heard my mom call my name so clearly that I would go downstairs and ask what she wanted, only for her to look at me confused and say she hadn't called me at all. Sometimes she wasn't even in the apartment. I had recurring nightmares for years. One night, I woke up because something felt like it was pushing me deep into the mattress. I was half awake, but I remember trying so hard to fight back. I couldn't move. I felt trapped and violated, like something was touching me and I had no control over my own body. The next morning, I had scratches exactly where I remembered feeling it. I also used to hear tiny, fast footsteps running up and down the stairs. The metal railing would shake like someone was grabbing it while they ran, and I saw shadow figures more than once. One afternoon, I was upstairs in my mom's room singing because the acoustics in there were really good. When I stopped, someone outside the room kept humming the melody back. It sounded like a child. I opened the door slowly, and at the other end of the hallway, a towel hanging on the drying rack was moving by itself. Then I heard small footsteps running downstairs. Another night, my brother came storming into my room, furious, telling me to stop knocking on his door. But I had been asleep the entire time. Once, a friend was visiting. She was in the bathroom, and I was lying in bed. Through the gap in my door, I thought I saw her walk upstairs, so I didn't think much of it. A minute later, she came back into my room and said, "So, if you're here, who did I just see walking upstairs in the bathroom mirror?" She didn't believe in ghosts. She was completely skeptical about anything paranormal, but she was shaken. My ex-boyfriend once cried because he got so scared inside that apartment. Several friends refused to sleep over after visiting. Other people told me they felt uncomfortable there but couldn't explain why. Some of them even started dreaming about the apartment after being there. And even now, years later, I still dream about it. The staircase shows up over and over again. The pale yellow walls, the black railings, the same strange, empty feeling. In my dreams, there are hidden rooms, secret elevators, endless hallways, underground spaces, and doors that lead somewhere they shouldn't. Sometimes I dream that the outside walkway collapses under me and I fall into darkness. There's one nightmare I only had once, but I still remember it so clearly. I was sitting at the bottom of the staircase in complete darkness. The front door was slightly open. My brother told me to wait there while he went upstairs. Then this huge black figure appeared. It was impossibly tall, with glowing red eyes and a giant black hole where its mouth should have been. And it charged straight at me. I woke up drenched in sweat. Another morning, when I was around 15, I woke up, picked up my phone, and found a photo of myself sleeping in my gallery. Both of my arms were visible in the picture, so I know I didn't take it. I still have no explanation for that. My mom had her own experiences too. She has always been unusually sensitive to things she can't explain. When she was very young, she almost died from an infection and spent time in a coma. After that, she always said she perceived things differently. As a child, she apparently dreamed about relatives dying before they passed away. Strange things also seemed to happen around her when she was extremely angry. My dad once mocked her spiritual beliefs, and she got furious. According to both of them, the blinds suddenly slammed shut on their own. My parents have been divorced for more than 15 years, and my dad still tells that story. My mom was deeply unhappy in that apartment. My father was abusive, and there was a lot of pain in that home. One day, when she was overwhelmed, she started chanting words I still can't remember. Later, when she and my father were together, she looked over his shoulder into the hallway and saw a tall man standing at the end of the staircase. He had long black hair, a suit, and an intense stare. Then he disappeared. Another time, she was ironing and saw a small child walk casually around the ironing board before vanishing. She also experienced the same thing I did, waking up unable to move while something pressed her into the bed. And once, she lost a Bluetooth headset. She searched everywhere for it. A year later, she found 2 identical headsets sitting together at the bottom of the staircase. My brother heard the knocking too. He heard strange noises. He heard people calling his name when nobody had called him. At one point, things felt so heavy that we decided to cleanse the apartment with incense. Every window was open, and there was a strong breeze running through the place. But the smoke refused to leave through the windows. My brother also dealt with sleep paralysis, sleepwalking, night terrors, and constant sleep problems. One of his Muslim friends came over once. When they walked past my sister's room on the 3rd floor, a drinking glass suddenly flew off her desk. It didn't just fall. It had been placed far back on the desk. His friend immediately said, "There's Shaitan living here." He never came back. My sister was the skeptic in the family. She's very science-minded and doesn't consider herself sensitive to anything paranormal. But even she has stories. One night, she woke up because her blanket was pulled off her body. Not gently. It lifted upward first, then was ripped away violently. She also remembers the noises and the constant feeling of being watched. And she says that feeling disappeared completely after she moved out. We fought constantly in that apartment. It always felt soaked in negative emotions, old hurt, and heavy energy. I don't know what was there. I wish I did. So many strange things seemed connected to the bottom of the staircase near the apartment entrance. A very spiritual friend of my mom's once visited and told her she believed there were 2 presences there, a child and something much darker. I still wonder about it. Did my mom somehow invite something in without realizing it? Was it years of trauma affecting all of us? Or was there actually something living there with us? And can something like that follow you after you leave? Because I still dream about that apartment. It still feels like it has some kind of hold on me. After my ex and I broke up, I wanted to move back into the district where I grew up. Without really planning it, I ended up living just a few blocks from that old apartment. It's still there, and every time I walk past it, I get goosebumps. That same feeling comes back immediately. The feeling I had my whole life. Like something inside still remembers me. Hey there, it's Diego Gomez speaking. You might remember me from the Slice of Strange blog and podcast. Today, I'm going to share a chilling story that's been tucked away in the shadows of Siberia's icy expanse. It's about a small town named Malinkovsky, a place that once bustled not far from Norilsk, but then simply disappeared. No grand headlines, no official reports, just silence. And if you ask the locals in Norilsk, you might hear whispers about government cover-ups and eerie investigations. Or maybe you'll hear nothing at all, because not everyone is eager to talk about it. Let me take you back to 1966. Malinkovsky was founded just a year earlier, in 1965, when the Soviet mining giant Nornickel sought to expand its reach beyond Norilsk in search of valuable metals hidden beneath the Arctic soil. Officially, Nornickel insists that their operations were confined to the Tonkskoye field, where the world's largest deposit of copper-nickel ores lies. They'll tell you Malinkovsky never existed. But I've dug deeper, and today, I want to share with you an interview I did with Dmitry Petrov, the former head of the Norilsk Police Department during those strange times. We sat down in a small, dimly lit room, the air thick with nostalgia and something heavier, an unspoken tension. Dmitry cleared his throat, the creak of his worn leather chair filling the silence. "I hope you found your way all right," I said gently. "That office can be tricky to navigate." "No trouble," he replied, his voice steady but quiet. I leaned in. "You mentioned in your emails that things didn't just quietly disappear. What happened exactly?" Dmitry inhaled slowly, as if bracing himself. "It started when the calls began. Malinkovsky didn't have its own police force yet, just a few officers stationed nearby. We handled the incoming emergencies." "Why no local police?" I asked. "Bureaucracy, mostly," Dmitry said with a faint shrug. "Nornickel built the town, but it was officially just an extension of Norilsk, only about 32 kilometers away." I nodded. "So, the calls were about the town disappearing?" He shook his head. No. The first calls were about the mine. Smoke. People thought there was a fire. What were they mining? A mix. Platinum, copper, nickel. It was chaotic. They set up a camp, then buildings, and before long, a town grew. In the first 6 months, around 500 people moved in. By the end, about 900, Dmitry corrected himself. 900, I echoed. Yes. The calls came early afternoon. The mine, nearly a kilometer outside town, was smoking. No trees around, nothing that should catch fire easily. We sent officers. The fire department from Norilsk was on its way, but the fire truck had to travel those 32 kilometers. We didn't expect much, until his voice faltered. A heavy silence filled the room. Dmitry's shaky breaths were the only sounds. After nearly 20 seconds, I gently prompted, "Dmitry?" He exhaled slowly, eyes distant. "It's hard to talk about. I keep seeing it." "Take your time," I said softly. He nodded. "That Tuesday started like any other. We didn't have much crime. the usual bar fights on weekends. About an hour after the fire truck left, it went quiet. Too quiet. Our men weren't answering radios. We were getting ready to go, to send more help, when suddenly, the phones rang non-stop. Static-filled calls, voices trapped in smoke and fear. They said they were stuck, screaming, unable to escape. We rushed with more trucks and firefighters, 6 officers, 5 firemen, through a sudden, fierce snowstorm that wasn't forecasted. Visibility was almost zero. When we arrived, smoke wrapped the town like a suffocating blanket, thick and low, mingling with the blowing snow. We could barely tell what was burning. "Did the fire rage through the storm?" I asked, captivated. "Yes," Dmitri whispered. But what was strange wasn't just the fire. The smoke hung low, heavy, like it was alive. We thought we heard people, faint screams carried by the howling wind. His hands trembled and his voice grew faint. "I know it sounds mad, but it was real." Wanting to ease the tension, I offered a break, some coffee. Dmitri accepted quietly, and the recording paused. Fast forward to 1989, there was another eerie incident. Soviet engineers, led by a man named Mr. Ozakov, drilled 14.4 kilometers beneath Siberia's surface, expecting to find oil. Instead, they broke into a vast cavity with temperatures soaring over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Their sensors were destroyed by intense heat, and through the static, they claimed to hear tortured voices screaming from the depths. This terrifying place became known as the Well to Hell, a name whispered with dread. Back in our conversation, Dmitri thanked my wife for dinner, his voice softer now. "Where were we?" he asked. "You just arrived in town, struggling to see through the smoke and snow, and you mentioned the screams." He nodded slowly. "The firefighters took charge, trying to control the blaze. We helped dig trenches in the snow, sprayed water, searched buildings for survivors. But every building was empty. No one on the streets. A town of nearly 1,000 souls vanished. The screams had stopped. Only the crackle of flames and the whistling wind remained. Could the fire have claimed everyone? "Unlikely," Dmitri replied. "We'd received so many calls just an hour earlier. We thought maybe they had gathered somewhere safe." Maxim and I searched the streets, knowing the fire's dangers, listening for signs of life. And then? The wind carried whispers, incoherent but unmistakable. We followed them to the town's edge, where the voices turned to singing. Hundreds of voices, some harmonious, some not, singing the same haunting, joyful tune. It was strange and beautiful. I felt relief, but Maxim was wary. "Why are they at the mine? That's where the fire started," he said. "What was the song?" I couldn't understand the words. The melody was joyful yet foreign. We couldn't approach on foot through the blizzard, so I went back for the car to report and plan a rescue. I was chosen to return. He paused, swallowing hard. But when I got there, they were gone. The mine smoked fiercely, the stench of burning flesh and sulfur overwhelming. Even with my respirator, I wanted to vomit. Then, I heard the singing again, louder, ringing in my ears, pounding in my skull. Voices twisted with agony, singing that same tune but filled with torment. I pushed through the smoke, the heat unbearable, the floor sticky beneath my feet. I made it about 25 meters before the singing turned into screams of agony, the words tearing at their throats. I couldn't take it anymore and ran back to the car. Dimitri's hands clenched around his coffee mug, knuckles white. We never found the people. Rumors say the Soviet forces recovered charred, mangled bodies from the mine, but nothing official was ever said. Why was this hidden? We were ordered to keep silent. People disappeared, likely taken by the military. Fear kept us quiet. Roads were sealed, travel restricted. The only exit was the airport, tightly controlled. Anyone involved with Melankovsky was barred from leaving. How did you get out? I snuck to a port 40 miles away and stowed away on a ship. Eventually, I made it here. Thank you for sharing this, Dmitri. Any final thoughts? Don't go to Siberia, he said quietly. I laughed softly. You don't need to tell me twice. After all this, I went to Siberia myself. I managed to enter Norilsk under the guise of an artistic photographer working on an article about the city's brighter side. Melankovsky? There was no town, no ashes beneath the snow, no military camps. Just an empty stretch of frozen earth and the eerie silence of a place lost to time. Yet, if you listen closely on cold, windy nights, perhaps you might still catch the faintest whisper of that haunting song, carried on the Siberian wind. Hey, I want to share with you this story, something that's been weighing heavily on me. It's about diving back into the deep, dark ocean when everything inside you screams not to. Let me take you there. The moment I plunged beneath the surface, the first thing that hit me wasn't the cold or the silence. It was pure, unfiltered fear. You know how sometimes you avoid something so much that even the smallest reminder sets your nerves on edge? That was me. It had been months since I last dove. Hell, I'd even found myself nervous just taking a shower. But despite that knot in my chest, the guilt, the ache, I knew I had to go back. I started swimming, one arm cutting through the water, then the other pulling me forward, inching closer to the submersible bobbing gently in the waves. When I reached it, I grabbed onto the edge and pulled myself up, gasping for breath. Harry was there, his grip firm on my hand as he hauled me out. For a moment, he just stared at me with that look, equal parts irritation and understanding. There, you warm enough now? He asked, trying to mask his frustration that I'd needed to splash around in the cold water before we could start. I just nodded, taking a deep breath through my nose and letting it out slowly. I'm ready. We climbed inside the cramped submersible where the rest of the crew waited. There was Robert, my old captain, his face framed by a gray beard and short, peppered hair, giving him a weathered, boxy look. He sat beside Irene, a short, sturdy woman with dark hair and piercing green eyes. I took my seat next to Robert while Harry settled at the helm and began steering us downwards. Now, before this dive, Robert thought I was crazy. After all, he hadn't seen what took Brett, hadn't witnessed what attacked us down there. But he'd heard enough over the radio to know we should pack up and get far away from that cursed island. Funny thing, though, I wasn't the only one eager to go back down. Shortly after our tense conversation, a couple of men in military uniforms showed up outside our office. They introduced themselves as Lieutenant Harry and Lieutenant Commander Johnson from NOAA. Robert's face twisted with rage when he saw them. He stepped forward, pointing a finger right at Johnson's chest, his voice rising. 2 months! We've been trying to reach you for 2 whole months. What the hell is going on? Anne, trying to calm Robert down, pulled at his arm, but Johnson wiped the spit from his face and responded calmly. We weren't allowed to make contact until we had more information. Before Johnson could finish, Robert shouted again, What information? What happened to the boy you sent to die? Johnson removed his hat, lowered his gaze. What happened to Brett? We just couldn't have known. That weighed on us all. Back inside the submersible, the HOV, it jostled gently with the waves, pulling me from my thoughts. It's about 60 feet long, but inside, where we sit, it's tight. The habitable section is just 15 feet, with a control console at the front, chairs lined up behind it. Ahead, a window framed by twin lights piercing the darkness ahead. I stared out into the black abyss, waiting, half expecting some shadowy shape to glide out and swallow us whole. What's our depth? I finally asked, shaking myself. Robert glanced down and read aloud, 1,400 meters. We were halfway to the trench's entrance. I let out a shaky breath, and Irene glanced over at me, concern etched on her face. You gonna be able to handle this? I gave her a solemn nod, though my heart pounded. Later, Johnson told me bluntly, we need you to go back into the trench. He locked eyes with me, trying to gauge my reaction. When I agreed, his eyes widened in surprise. Thought I'd need more convincing, he joked, a hint of relief in his voice. Robert looked like he wanted to argue, but I cut in. You'll have to pay us well, but yeah, I get it. This isn't just a whim. You're sending some of your guys with us, right? I'm not going down there alone to die. I want to know you're invested in keeping me safe. Johnson nodded, calm but serious. Harry's coming, along with a navigation officer. You'll be in a sub, no toes in the water this time. Robert finally spoke, voice heavy with suspicion. Why? What could you possibly want down there? Johnson's face turned cold, voice low. We're going to blow it up. Irene's voice brought us back as we reached 2,700 meters. Time to get to work, she said. I blinked away the haze, all of us peering out the window at the bubbles rising past. Harry's voice, usually so steady, wavered. Shouldn't we be seeing some by now? They've been all over the archipelago. I figured we'd see them pouring out in swarms. We stared, tension thick in the air. Then Harry nudged me, irritation creeping in. Well, you're the expert. Answer me. I glared, but Robert stood tall. He saw them once. Use your head. There are no experts with something like this. Harry shot a dagger's glance but relented, turning back to the controls. We learned a lot about the logistics of dropping a bomb into a mile-wide ocean trench. The water pressure would absorb most of the blast, gases bubbling to the surface with minimal environmental harm. Still, the threat was serious enough that we needed a smaller bomb, and someone experienced to place it precisely. Then, something bumped the glass. A squid, oddly behaving, bumping again and again. Irene leaned in, squinting. Harry gagged. The creature's back was swollen, pulsing with dozens of small holes, from which wriggled long, red worms with disc-shaped heads. They poked at the glass, then retreated. Another creature passed, a stingray, missing fins, consumed by those same worms. More and more floated past, a horrifying parade. Harry took deep breaths, Irene placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. You okay? He shook his head, then answered, Yeah, that was disgusting. We all agreed. Robert snapped, frustrated. Why can't you just drop the bomb and be done? Why send us down again? Johnson answered, We're not nuking the trench. It's a targeted bombing. We need someone who's been there to pinpoint the exact target. I swallowed hard. What exactly are you looking for? Robert interrupted. He barely went in. I cut him off, eyes wide with the memory. There was a whale. Hundreds of worms inside it, big enough to drag Brett in like a rag doll. And the whale, it was alive. They didn't kill it. The men exchanged glances. Yeah, that could be it, Johnson said quietly. The sub drifted to a stop. We all rose, pressing to the window. Ahead, faint yellow lights glowed. What's our depth? Robert asked, hand on the glass. Irene read the gauge softly. 7,400 meters. Nearly as deep as Everest is tall. Is that the bottom? Harry fiddled with controls. Let's find out. He launched a flare, a glowing beacon drifting down toward the dim lights. My stomach twisted as the glow illuminated the ocean floor. There, a field of writhing cysts pulsed softly with sickly yellow light. They looked like giant fly eyes, each mound covered in twitching bubbles. Occasionally, a pustule burst, releasing waves of worms and leaking thick, viscous fluid that clumped slowly into new cysts. "Good God," Robert said, stepping back, pale and queasy. "One nest, but no whale," Harry murmured. What came next chilled us all. A massive, pale black eel-like creature circled the cysts. It was slender, slimy, with long white fins running its length. Its powerful movements displaced the water, jostling our sub. As it turned, its face came into view, a gaping maw lined with rows of sharp teeth, dripping the same sickly yellow liquid. It convulsed, and a round shape moved along its belly like an egg traveling down a snake. When it reached the mouth, the creature vomited a large clump of yellow snot onto the ocean floor, which wriggled and formed a new cyst. "We need to go," Irene said, voice tight. "We can't blow that up. We need missiles or something." Harry nodded and began turning us upward. But then the creature noticed us. Its massive form undulated like a giant serpent as it approached. We sat frozen, terror gripping us. Irene's trembling hand reached out and switched off the lights. After a few heart-stopping seconds, Robert whispered, "Should we fire another flare? Maybe it'll go after it and we can get away." Harry's hand hovered, shaking, before pressing the button. The flare shot out like a dim shooting star and burst into light. Then, just 30 meters ahead, the creature lunged, mouth wide open. Chaos erupted. It slammed into the sub, smashing and latching onto the window like a suction cup. The glass cracked, water seeping in. We were halfway inside its mouth, teeth curving around us, scraping white lines into the glass. Harry fired flares rapidly. 3 landed on the creature, which recoiled and released us, flinging the sub through the water. Harry fought to steady our fragile craft, pushing us away as fast as possible. But speed wasn't our ally. We were trapped in this metal coffin miles beneath the surface. I gripped my chair with white-knuckled strength, heart hammering. Irene frantically scanned the controls for any salvation. We couldn't deploy the bomb yet, not from inside the creature's mouth. It needed to be carefully placed with the sub's arm, and detonating it too close would mean certain death. So, we waited. Silently. We couldn't see our pursuer, but we heard it. The slow, rhythmic swish of its long body moving through the water. Harry kept us moving upward. We watched the depth gauge tick higher. 7,200 meters, 7,150, 7,100. With every meter closer to the surface, our breaths steadied, hope flickering. Then, silence. No more sounds of the creature. Relief washed over us, brief, fragile. But as light filtered down from above, we saw them. Dozens of fish, drifting strangely, floating as if lifeless. The worms had spread. We survived, yes, but we failed. And whatever that thing was, whatever those creatures were, it's only getting worse. Now I'm back on land, sitting at my desk, haunted by everything I've seen. I don't have a happy ending for you. Those things are still out there, lurking in the depths. The ocean isn't safe anymore. Please, if you value your life, stay out of the water. I've always had this strange love for Edinburgh. There's something about that city that gets under your skin, in the best and worst way. The hills, the old stone buildings, the castles sitting there like they've been watching everything for centuries. And then there's the history, which is beautiful, but also incredibly dark. Before I ever went there, I used to read about the underground vaults beneath the city. They were originally built for merchants to store goods, but because Edinburgh is so damp and the stone was so porous, everything kept getting ruined. So the vaults were abandoned, but people still ended up living down there. A lot of them had nowhere else to go. And back then, being homeless could get you punished severely, even killed. So people hid underground, in those cold, wet spaces beneath the streets. Then, when parts of the city burned, the heat traveled down through the stone. Those vaults basically turned into ovens, and the people hiding inside never made it out. There were also all the witch trials. And the sad thing is, many of the people accused weren't witches at all. A lot of them were healers, people who understood herbs and natural remedies. But fear took over, and once fear gets dressed up as justice, terrible things happen. All of that fascinated me. So when I finally got the chance to visit Edinburgh in late 2022, I was thrilled. It was supposed to be 4 of us, 2 friends, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and me. But one friend canceled right before the trip, so it ended up being 3 of us. We stayed in a hostel for the first couple of nights, then booked an Airbnb for the final night. The plan was to do all the tourist stuff, walk the city, visit the old places, and take a late-night cemetery tour. Honestly, most of the trip was wonderful. Edinburgh felt exactly the way I hoped it would. Cold, dramatic, ancient. The whole place had this heavy atmosphere, but in a way I liked. Then we got to the Airbnb. We checked out of the hostel around lunchtime, left our bags there, wandered around all afternoon, and finally went to the flat in the evening. It wasn't far, so we just rolled our luggage through the streets. The only problem was that the apartment was on the 3rd floor, with no lift. Since I was the only man in the group, and apparently determined to prove I had working arms, I offered to carry the bags up myself. I took the lighter ones first. The apartment door was dark gray, with a silver number 3 fixed right in the center. I unlocked it and stepped inside. And immediately, something felt wrong. Not messy, not unsafe in any obvious way, just wrong. I had this sudden feeling that I was being watched. It was so strong that before I even brought the bags in properly, I started checking the windows and balcony doors to make sure they were locked. The flat itself was spotless. It had this vintage sort of style, like someone had tried to make it feel old-fashioned but still comfortable. The kitchen had pastel appliances, the dining table was clean, the plates and cutlery were laid out neatly, and nothing seemed out of place. Except the wardrobe in our bedroom. One of its doors was wide open. That probably sounds like nothing, and normally I'd agree, but everything else had been arranged so carefully. The chairs, the plates, the forks, even the cushions. So why leave that one wardrobe door hanging open? I couldn't stop staring at it. Then I heard my girlfriend and our friend coming up the stairs, so I quickly shut the wardrobe door and walked back out to meet them. They loved the place. They were talking about how nice it was, how cozy it looked, how much better it was than the hostel. But while I was carrying our bags into the bedroom, I noticed something else. The 2 bedrooms were side by side, so they should have shared a wall. But from the living room, I could see there was space between them. Not a tiny gap either. It looked wide enough to hide a small storage room. Then I saw the outline. There was a door there. Someone had covered it with wallpaper, but not well enough. You could still see the frame pressing through if you looked at it from the right angle. That was when I really started to feel uneasy. I've had this kind of feeling a few times in my life. Not often. Maybe 3 or 4 times total. It's hard to explain, but it's like my body knows something before my mind can catch up. And in that flat, every part of me was telling me something was off. The feeling of being watched, the wardrobe door, the covered-up room. I didn't like any of it. By that point, we were exhausted, so we ordered food and ate at the dining table. We joked that at least we were getting to use the fancy plates and cutlery. But the whole time, I kept thinking about that wardrobe and that hidden door. And the feeling in the flat kept getting heavier. Eventually, we went to bed. Our room was the bigger one. It was long and narrow, with 2 large windows on one side covered by blackout curtains. The bed was pushed against the wall, and that hidden room was directly behind the headboard. At the far end of the bedroom was a couch, and beside it stood the wardrobe. It matched the style of the flat, but in a way that made it feel worse. Tall, dark, old-looking. The kind of wardrobe that doesn't belong in a normal night of sleep. Still, we were tired enough that we fell asleep almost immediately. Then I woke up around midnight. I didn't wake up calmly. My heart was hammering, my breathing was heavy, and that feeling was back. Someone was watching me. I kept my eyes closed because I was afraid of what I'd see if I opened them. But eventually, I opened them just a little, barely enough to see through my eyelashes. My eyes went straight to the wardrobe. The door was open again, only slightly, but there was something on top of it. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I realized it looked like long black hair hanging down over the edge. I looked higher, and I saw pale hands gripping the top of the wardrobe door. Then a white nightdress. Then a face, mostly hidden behind the hair. There was a woman crouched on top of the wardrobe, watching me. I don't know if it was my breathing or my heartbeat, or just the fact that I was frozen beside her, but my girlfriend woke up. She asked me what was wrong. We'd been together for years by then, and she knew I sometimes got these strange feelings about places. So I told her exactly what I was seeing. I told her there was a woman on the wardrobe. She couldn't see anything, but she could see me. She could see how scared I was. So she reached over and turned on the bedside lamp. The room filled with light, and the woman disappeared. Not faded, not drifted away. It was stranger than that. It was like a video skipping a frame. 1 second she was there, and the next second she wasn't. No movement, no transition. Just gone. We left the lamp on after that. Somehow I fell asleep again. Then I woke up a second time, and this time, the fear was worse. The lamp was still on, but it didn't help. The room was lit, and somehow that made the feeling even more awful. I was lying on one side of the bed. I reached out and felt my girlfriend beside me, still there, still sleeping. But I could feel someone else too, standing right next to my side of the bed. A woman. The same woman. I didn't see her this time because I kept my eyes shut, but I knew she was there. I could feel her leaning over me. I could feel her looking down at my face. It felt like her hair was hanging just inches above me. I was terrified that if I opened my eyes, I'd be staring straight into hers. My girlfriend woke up again, thank God. She asked me what was happening, and I whispered that the woman was beside the bed. That scared her too, but she still got up and turned on every light in the room. And as soon as the room brightened fully, the presence vanished, just gone. We stayed awake for a while after that, with all the lights on. Eventually, we slept a little, but not properly. The next morning, we checked out quickly because we had plans, and we tried to act normal. Our friend had slept alone in the other bedroom, and she scares easily, so we decided not to tell her right then. Months later, we finally mentioned it. She said she'd felt completely fine that night, slept perfectly. I haven't experienced anything like that since. I've even gone back to Edinburgh because despite everything, I still love that city. But I never stayed in that flat again. And nothing happened the second time. No strange feelings, no figures, no wardrobe door opening by itself. Still, I think about that night more than I'd like to admit. That wardrobe, that hidden room, that woman crouched above me in the dark. Even now, when I remember it, I get that same cold feeling in my chest. And more than anything, I'm grateful I wasn't alone in that room. Hi. I'm sharing this because I need to get it out. And because I'm hoping someone out there has been through something even close to what happened to me. This all started in January, on the 17th. Before that night, I was pretty skeptical. I mean, I'd always been curious about paranormal things, and when I was younger, I did see a few things I couldn't explain, but I never thought something like this would happen to me. I ordered a cheap spirit board online. Nothing special. Honestly, I thought it probably wouldn't even work. When the package arrived, I opened it right away. I didn't light candles. I didn't prepare anything. I just sat down with it, almost treating it like a strange little experiment. The first try lasted maybe 2 minutes. Nothing much happened. Then I tried again. I asked, "Is anyone here with me?" And the planchette moved to yes. At first, I wasn't scared. I was fascinated. It felt like something was guiding my hand, not pushing the planchette by itself, but using me somehow. That's the best way I can explain it. The thing claimed it was an impure soul. It said it only wanted to keep me company. Looking back, I think that was where I made my first mistake. When I ended the session, I didn't properly close it myself. I let the board go silent without really saying goodbye in the right way. And I wish I could go back and change that. Over the next few days, I used the board a few more times. 5 sessions in total. By the 5th day, I threw it away. But by then, something had already changed. At first, it was my sleep. I would lie down calm, but my body felt wired and nervous, like fear had been poured into my veins without my permission. Then one night, whenever I closed my eyes, I saw a board in my mind. Not the one I bought. This one had red letters, vivid and sharp, and it kept showing me the words, "Don't leave me." That was when the real fear began. Then I heard the voice. It wasn't outside of me. It was inside, using the same inner voice I use when I think. That made it worse somehow because I couldn't get away from it. I told my husband I didn't know what was happening, but something about that board felt wrong. I kept saying, "I was fine before this. I was completely normal before this. I'm 36. I had never experienced anything like this. That night, the voice told me to throw the board away. I thought maybe that would stop everything, so I got up and put it in the trash. But shortly after, the voice changed. It stopped pretending to be kind. It threatened me. I panicked. I tried to get the board back, but the garbage had already been taken. I cut my finger by accident while rushing around. I called my mother crying, which is something I never do. I was terrified in a way I can't fully describe. Then I felt like something was interfering with my body. My phone went off. I went back to my bedroom to wake my husband, and suddenly I felt a heavy pressure, like something forced me down onto the bed. I couldn't breathe properly. There was weight on my chest. I was crying and begging my husband for help. A few moments later, I tried to stand, and I felt that same terrible weight on my back. I fell to the floor and crawled, honestly believing I was going to die. Then, after a short while, it stopped. That's one thing I want to say clearly. The more fear I gave it, the stronger it seemed to become. After that, I tried to calm down. I called my mother again, around 4 in the morning. And then something happened that disturbed me deeply. It felt like the voice used my own throat to speak. It said strange, dramatic things to my mother, things that made no sense. Later, the experiences became even more humiliating and invasive. My body would move in ways I didn't want it to move. I felt sensations I didn't ask for. I felt trapped inside myself, frightened and ashamed, trying to explain something that sounded impossible. At one point, the voice told me it was going to burn my back. Then my back started burning. I ran to my husband crying, telling him it felt like fire. He lifted my sweatshirt and he saw a mark appearing there. I took photos of it. It looked almost like a face with 2 horn-like shapes on either side. The skin was hot to the touch. I barely slept. My mother came to stay with me for a while because I was so shaken. My husband, my mother, and her partner believed that something had truly happened to me, because they knew who I was before all of this. They knew I wasn't someone who behaved like this or imagined things for attention. That was one of the hardest parts, knowing how easy it would be for other people to dismiss me. A few nights later, it got so bad that my family took me to the hospital. I was exhausted. I felt half dead from lack of sleep. The mark on my back appeared again, and the doctors didn't know what to make of it. Some suggested I might have fallen. One asked if it could be a rash. Hearing that made me feel so alone. Eventually, I saw a psychiatrist. He touched the mark and said it was warmer than the rest of my skin. He suggested the mind can sometimes do powerful things to the body. I didn't believe that explanation, but at that point I was desperate for anything that might help. He prescribed medication, and for the first time in days, I slept. After that, the voice didn't have the same grip over my body, at least not like before. I think two things helped: the medication and my own determination to reject whatever this was. But it didn't disappear. Some days it still felt close. Sometimes it would speak through me for a second or two, and afterward I wouldn't remember what had happened. Once it said something threatening to my husband, and when he reacted angrily, I had no idea why. The days blurred together after that. The voice insulted me constantly. It tried to humiliate me, frighten me, and keep me tired. It used images from horror films I liked and twisted them into something disturbing. It invaded my dreams. It seemed to know what scared me, what upset me, and what made me feel vulnerable. My mother tried prayers. I tried prayers too. We went to a priest, but he wasn't an exorcist. He prayed with me, and although I appreciated him trying, it didn't solve it. Over time, I started noticing patterns. The more distressed I became, the louder it seemed. The more I gave in to fear, sadness, anger, or obsessive thoughts, the stronger it felt. When I forced myself to avoid feeding it with panic, the voice became more distant. Medication helped reduce some symptoms, but it didn't erase everything. That's where I am now. I'm still fighting this every day. I don't expect everyone to believe me. I know how this sounds. But I also know who I was before that board arrived at my door, and I know what changed afterward. I'm not sharing this to be dramatic. I'm sharing it because I feel isolated, and because I want to find people who went through something similar after using a spirit board. If you've experienced anything like this, I hope you know you're not alone. And if someone listening is thinking about using one of those boards just for fun, please be careful. I wish I had never touched mine. I want to tell you about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. And honestly, I still think about it from time to time. I was lying in bed one night with my cats curled up around me, all cozy and comfortable. I had my bedroom door open, mostly because the cats like to wander in and out, and sometimes one of our dogs would come in too. I was home by myself for once, so I wasn't worried about my siblings walking past my room or bothering me. The way our house was laid out, my door opened into this small hallway. My sister's room was directly across from mine, and the bathroom was off to the right. I was just watching something on my phone when I heard these tiny footsteps coming toward my doorway. They sounded like little pitter-patters, so I assumed it was our older dog. He had back problems and couldn't jump onto the bed by himself, so I sat up, ready to help him up if he wanted to join me. But then the footsteps stopped just around the corner, right outside my view. And then, without any warning, this dark little shape ran past my doorway. It looked roughly like a child, maybe toddler-sized, but it wasn't a child. It was just this solid shadow. No face, no clothes, no features. Just a small, dark figure. It darted straight into my sister's room and jumped onto her bed. But there was no sound, no floor creak, no mattress noise, no springs, nothing. I completely froze. For about 20 minutes, I barely moved. I was slowly reaching toward the little cross I kept on my bedside table, because in that moment, I genuinely had no idea what else to do. I sat there for nearly 2 hours, trying not to panic, until my family finally came home. Only then was I able to move properly and close my door. I told them what happened, and they checked the cameras, but nothing showed up. The cameras didn't even pick up the footsteps, even though I heard them clear as day. And I know it wasn't just a weird shadow from the sun or something passing by. This thing was too dark, too solid. It had shape, just no details. For a few weeks after that, I slept with a Bible near me and a cross hanging over my door. Then, about 3 months later, something else happened. I was in the living room watching TV. The room had a couch against one wall, and the TV was on the opposite wall. Behind the TV was the chimney for the fireplace. Behind the couch was the garage. To the right was the wall that led toward my room, and to the left was a big window facing the front yard. I was sitting there, just watching TV, when I suddenly heard knocking. It wasn't frantic or aggressive. It was loud, but not hard. It sounded exactly like someone knocking on a wooden door from close by. But the strange part was where it came from. It sounded like it came from the dead center of all 4 walls at the same time. There wasn't an echo. There wasn't a delay. It wasn't like one knock bounced around the room. It felt like 4 separate knocks happened at once, from 4 different places. I could almost feel it in my skull. And that scared me, because 2 of those walls shouldn't have been able to make that kind of sound at all. One of them was near the garage, one was by the chimney, and one was close to where I slept every night. I acted like I hadn't heard anything. I just sat there for a few minutes, trying to stay calm. Then I walked to my mom's room and asked her if she heard knocking. Her room was near 2 of the places the sound seemed to come from, but she said she hadn't heard anything. She told me I probably imagined it. But I know what I heard. It was too clear, and it gave me that exact feeling you get when someone is standing at the door. By that point, I started thinking maybe there was something in the house. It was an older place, so I told myself maybe it was just one of those things I would have to live with. Then, about 2 weeks after the knocking, I was in the kitchen making myself a microwave burrito. My phone was charging in another room, and I was just standing there waiting for the timer to finish. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the microwave. Then I heard a giggle. It was loud enough to cut through the microwave noise. It sounded like a little kid laughing at something in the next room, like they were playing a game or watching something funny. But the sound was strange. There was no echo, no muffled quality. Nothing like how a voice usually sounds coming from another room. It was almost like the laugh went straight through the brick of the chimney and into my head. Then it cut off suddenly, right before the giggle would have naturally faded out. By then I was more confused than terrified. I'd already had a couple of strange things happen, so I wasn't as shocked as I probably should have been. But that laugh stuck with me because of how unnatural it sounded. I haven't had anything like that happen in a long time now. Nothing dramatic came of it. There was no exorcism, no big curse, no horror movie ending. Life just kept going. But those moments happened, and even now, I can still remember them so clearly. This happened in the UK, sometime around late autumn of 2012. I was about 12 years old then, in year 8, and it was one of those ordinary school mornings where everything felt routine at first. I'd woken up early, probably around 4:30, maybe a little after. My mom had already left for work, so I was alone in the flat, just getting myself ready like I normally did. I'd been in my room earlier that morning. I'd got dressed in there, moved around in there, used the light with no problem at all. Everything was completely normal. After that, I went into the kitchen to have breakfast. Since it was autumn and still so early, the whole place beyond the kitchen felt dark and quiet. When I'd left my bedroom, I'd turned the light off behind me. Once I'd finished eating, I remembered I needed to grab something from my room before leaving for school. I don't even remember what it was now. Maybe a book or part of my uniform. But at the time, it felt important. So I walked down the corridor toward my bedroom. And the moment I reached the doorway, I stopped. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just darkness. It felt like I had walked straight into something thick and heavy, almost like a wall of pressure sitting in the doorway. The best way I can describe it is that the air itself felt hostile, dense, wrong. I know that sounds dramatic, but I'm not trying to dress it up. That is genuinely how it felt. I just stood there, staring into my room. It was pitch black inside, and suddenly, every part of me was telling me not to go in. My heart started racing, and I could feel panic rising in my chest before I even understood why. Then I remembered the light switch was right there by the door. So I reached in with my hand, keeping the rest of my body outside the room, and flicked it on. Nothing happened. That was when I really started to panic, because that light had been working perfectly maybe 20 minutes earlier. I flicked it again. Still nothing. I stepped back into the corridor, and the corridor light was fine. The kitchen light was fine. The living room light was fine. So it wasn't a power cut. It wasn't the whole flat. It was just my bedroom. And standing there, I had this overwhelming feeling that something was inside that room and did not want me coming in. I kept trying the switch, reaching in with my hand and flicking it over and over, but the light wouldn't come on. The whole time, that awful pressure was still there, right at the doorway. It felt almost physical, like if I pushed forward, I'd be pushing into something that had weight. I remember breathing too fast and trying to think clearly, but I couldn't. I thought about calling my mom, but she would have been at work by then, and I didn't know what I'd even say. I thought about knocking on a neighbor's door, but it was so early, and again, what would I tell them? That I was scared of my own bedroom? I felt trapped. I still had to get ready for school. I still had to leave on time. But I couldn't make myself cross that doorway. At one point, I put music on my phone because the silence in the flat was making everything worse. I hoped it would calm me down, or at least make the place feel less empty. It helped a tiny bit, but not much. I was still moving between the kitchen and the corridor, crying, watching my bedroom door the whole time. My gut was screaming that something was deeply wrong. In the end, I didn't go in. Whatever I needed from my room, I left it behind. I got my things from elsewhere, unlocked the front door, and kept looking back over my shoulder until I was out. Then I locked the door and went to school. When I came home later that afternoon, everything felt normal again. The flat was quiet, but not in that horrible way. My bedroom didn't feel heavy anymore. There was no pressure at the doorway, no sense that something was waiting in there. The first thing I did was try the light. It came on immediately. That scared me almost as much as it not working in the first place, because it meant the problem had only existed during that short window of time. Just that morning. Just when I'd needed to go into the room. Nothing like that ever happened again, but for weeks afterward, I felt uneasy whenever I went near that doorway in the dark. I still don't know what it was, but I know what I felt. It felt like something had filled my bedroom with a kind of energy so thick, it stopped me from entering. And to this day, I still wonder what could make a light fail like that only for those few minutes, and why it felt so much like the room itself was refusing to let me in. I still think about this night more often than I probably should. So, this happened when I went to a small hotel with my girlfriend, Lena. I had been drinking that evening, and honestly, I got way more drunk than I planned to. Lena didn't drink at all. She was completely sober the whole time. Later that night, she told me she wanted to head home early. She said she needed to catch the last bus and didn't want to waste money booking a ride. I was too far gone to follow her, so she told me to just stay in the room and rest. Before she left, she even packed my things neatly near the side of the bed because she knew I was in no condition to take care of myself properly. After she left, we were still texting for a little while. I remember lying there, half awake, staring at the ceiling. The room was tiny. The bed was close to the bathroom, close enough that you could hear almost everything from inside. And then, something happened that I still can't explain. I heard Lena's voice coming from the bathroom. At first, it sounded completely normal. She was asking me what time I was going home, telling me maybe I should just stay a bit longer and sleep it off. Her voice was not just similar. It sounded exactly like her. Same tone, same way of speaking, same little pauses between words. Then slowly, the way she talked changed. It became softer, more playful, almost teasing, like she was trying to pull my attention toward the bathroom. And the worst part is, I answered. I actually spoke back to it. At that moment, I fully believed Lena was still in the room with me. Somewhere in my head, I knew she had already left, but I was drunk enough that my brain just accepted what was happening. Then my phone buzzed beside me. I picked it up and looked at the screen. It was a message from Lena. She wrote, "Are you home already?" The moment I read that, I felt every bit of alcohol leave my body. My skin went cold, because seconds before that message came in, I had been hearing her voice from the bathroom, and I had been talking to it. The room went completely silent after that. Then suddenly, the toilet flushed by itself. I froze. I didn't even breathe properly for a few seconds. My heart was beating so hard it actually hurt. Eventually, I forced myself to get up and check the bathroom, because I needed there to be some normal explanation. A plumbing issue, a broken toilet, anything. But when I looked, there wasn't even enough water left in the tank for another proper flush. That was when I really panicked. My hands were shaking while I grabbed my things. I didn't even pack properly. I just wanted out of that room. The whole time, I had this awful feeling that something was still there, watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. Before leaving, I went to the front desk and told one of the hotel workers what had happened. What scared me even more was how calm he was. He didn't laugh. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded and said the hotel had experienced disturbances before. Then he told me that as long as I didn't pay attention to them, I would be fine. And I just stood there thinking, what do you mean, don't pay attention to them? I left immediately and booked a ride home. Even in the car, I kept trying to convince myself it was just the alcohol, that maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But I still can't explain how I heard a full conversation so clearly. I can't explain why the voice sounded exactly like Lena. I can't explain why the toilet flushed right after I realized she wasn't there. And I definitely can't explain why the worker reacted like this was just another normal night at the hotel. I barely slept after that, and honestly, I still wonder about it. Can alcohol really make you hear something that clearly? Or did I hear something that was pretending to be her? I've never really known how to explain this without sounding like I'm reaching for answers in the dark, but I'm going to try. When I was younger, my family lived in a house that never felt completely empty. I was there for most of my childhood, and for years, things happened that I still think about. I was the one who seemed to notice it the most. I heard things. I saw things. And because I was a kid, it was easy for everyone to tell me I was imagining it. But I know what I felt. When I got my own room, my parents gave me the bigger bedroom because it was in the middle of the house and they thought I'd feel safer there. Instead, I hated it. At night, I would hear footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Sometimes it sounded like they were inside the room too, or moving through the walls and ceiling. I cried so much that eventually my parents took that room back, and I went back to sharing with my sister. For a while, that helped. But it didn't stop the house from feeling alive in a way it shouldn't have. There were voices sometimes, shadows, objects moving when they shouldn't, sounds nobody else admitted to hearing. I got called dramatic, scared, even crazy. So I learned to keep a lot of it to myself. One morning, when I was around 11, I had my own room again. I'd promised my parents I wouldn't cry at night anymore. I told them I was older now, that I could be brave. My phone was charging on my dresser across from my bed, and my alarm went off for school. For some reason, even though it was just an alarm, the sound always startled me. I had even set it to a song I liked, but in that quiet house, it still felt wrong. Then my phone suddenly fell. It hadn't been near the edge. It had only been ringing for a few seconds. And when it hit the floor, I froze. I had one of those chargers that lit up, and the glow cast a shadow across the wall. What I saw looked like the side profile of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. I just stared at it, shaking, trying to make my body move. Finally, I forced myself to turn on the light. I waited a moment, trying to calm down, then went over to pick up my phone. The second my hand touched it, I felt this sudden rush of air brush past me, strong enough to lift my hair. For a moment, I felt like my body lifted too. Just barely, but enough that I've never forgotten it. A few months later, we moved. The landlord wanted the house back, and that was the end of living there. Except it wasn't really the end. After we left, I started dreaming about the house. Not once or twice, but again and again. Different dreams, different versions. Sometimes there were shadowy figures. Sometimes the house was burning. Once it was somehow sitting inside a cemetery near where we lived. Another time I dreamed I met someone who said he was the one who played all the people in my dreams, and he looked exhausted by it. That dream ended in my room at our new house. He smiled at me in this awful way and asked, "Do you know what's going to happen?" I begged him to tell me. He started mumbling something, like he was explaining the future, but I couldn't hear him because I kept crying and talking over him. It felt like one of those dreams where your own fear traps you inside it. Even now, years later, I still dream about going back. Sometimes when I'm out, I'll suddenly have this strange feeling that I'm going home, and for a split second, I mean that house. Then I remember I don't live there anymore. I haven't lived there in years. That's the part that unsettles me most. Sometimes it feels like everything that happened there goes quiet until I pass by it, and then it all wakes up again. Not long ago, I talked to the landlord's grandson. We had known each other since we were little, but we had never talked about the house. I asked him, kind of randomly, if I could ask him something about it. Before I even explained, he said, "Is this about the shadow man in the hallway?" I remember just stopping. He told me his mom had seen something near the bathroom on the day his grandparents moved in. She saw a figure there, the same kind of figure I remembered. A man, a shadow, something in the hall. Later, I found out an older man had lived in the house before us. My dad said he had seen him back when he was alive, and that he often wore a hat. Some people thought maybe he died in that house, maybe even in the larger bedroom, the room I had been so afraid to sleep in. After we moved out, my family started being more honest about what they had felt there. My parents, who were never the type to encourage ghost stories, admitted they knew something was wrong with that house. My mom especially said it terrified her. She said she always felt watched. And I think that hurt a little, knowing I hadn't been the only one scared, but I had been the one who carried it out loud. The strangest part is that even after everything, I think I would still go back if I had the chance. I don't know why. Maybe I want answers. Maybe a part of me is still standing in that hallway, listening. Maybe the house never fully let go of me. So I guess what I'm really asking is this: can a place, or whatever lives inside it, attach itself to a person? Because sometimes it feels like I left that house years ago, but something from it followed me anyway. I woke up last night with this awful, nervous feeling in my chest, the kind that spreads through your whole body before you even understand why. The strange thing is, I had gone to bed completely fine. I wasn't scared. I wasn't thinking about anything creepy. I stayed up for a little while playing Brawl Stars, put my phone down, and fell asleep sometime around 1 a.m. Then, at some point in the night, I woke up. I didn't check the time. I didn't want to. I just remember opening my eyes and hearing a song playing in my head. Not out loud, not from my phone, just inside my mind. It was looping over and over, and I don't know how to describe it except that it felt wrong. Waking up in the middle of the night, in the dark, with some disturbing song repeating in your head for no reason is not a good feeling. I was still half asleep, so I started looking around my room. First, I looked toward my bedroom door. There was a weak bit of light coming from the hallway, but nothing was there. Then I looked at my wardrobe. One of the doors was slightly open, and inside was just this thick darkness. It looked deeper than it should have, like the shadows were packed into it. The song still wouldn't stop. Then this uneasy feeling came over me. It wasn't exactly fear at first. It was more like my body knew something was off before my brain did. I looked over at my aunt, who was sleeping across from me, facing the wall. She was completely still, just asleep like normal. So I tried to tell myself I was being ridiculous. I lay back down and tried to calm down, but then I looked at the window, and that was the mistake. Between the blinds, right up close to the glass, I saw something outside. I live on the 3rd floor, so there shouldn't have been anything there. But for that 1 second, I saw a shape. It was round, maybe around the size of a small bird or a chicken, with these pointed parts hanging down from the bottom. It looked like it was pressed near the window, like it was looking in. I froze. I only stared for a moment before forcing myself to look away. I kept telling myself, it's probably just the trees. It's just the trees. There are palm trees outside, so I tried to convince myself that must have been what I saw. Then I turned over and somehow managed to fall asleep again. When I woke up at 6, I had almost forgotten about it. My alarm went off like usual, and for a while, I didn't even think to check the window. I have a hurt ankle right now, so I decided to stay home instead of going out. Later, when more daylight came into the room, the memory suddenly came back. I went straight to the window. There was nothing there. And that's when I felt cold all over again, because the palm trees are nowhere near where I saw the shape. They're farther away and off to the side. Whatever I saw had been right in the center of the window, between the blinds, close to the glass. It didn't look like a tree. It still makes my skin crawl thinking about it. Later on, I realized where the song had come from. It was from an Instagram reel my friend had sent me a few days before. The video had distorted images and clips playing with that same song in the background. So maybe my mind just dragged it up while I was half asleep. Maybe the shape was nothing. But I remember exactly what I saw, and I remember exactly how it felt. and I still don't want to look at that window at night. Back in May of 2014, my family went through a really painful loss. My grandfather Leon passed away after a long and difficult battle with pancreatic cancer. He was a veteran, but he was also a deeply creative person. He painted, sketched, played music, and worked on all kinds of artistic projects throughout his life. Not long before he passed, there had even been a celebration of his artwork down in Florida, which feels really special to think about now. When the funeral came, we all drove out to Quantico for his military burial. I was only 9 years old at the time, so a lot of the day is blurry in my memory. I remember standing there with my family, listening to people speak about him. I remember the honor guard firing the blank shots, too. I didn't handle that part very well because I've always been sensitive to loud noises. But the part that stayed with me most happened afterward. We were all getting back into the car, ready to leave, and the car just would not start. My mom tried the key again and again, but nothing happened. It was an older car, so normally I'd say, well, that explains it. But what happened next is what makes me pause. After a few tries, my mom just sat there for a second and said something like, "Dad, you can let us go now. I know." Then she turned the key one more time, and the car started. Just like that. Even now, I know how easy it is to call something like that a coincidence. The car was old. Cars act up. Things happen. But the timing of it has always felt strange to me. It didn't start until my mom spoke directly to him, almost like she was acknowledging that he was there, or that he was having a hard time letting go. I've had other odd experiences around funerals too. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but sometimes there's this heavy feeling in the room. Not frightening, really. More like someone is still lingering nearby, like their presence hasn't fully faded yet. With my grandfather, I've always wondered if maybe that moment at the car was his way of reaching out one last time. My mom had spent time with him near the end, sitting with him while he was dying, and then after she left, he passed away. So maybe there was something unfinished there. Maybe he just wanted her to know he was still with us, for one final moment. I don't remember everything about him because I was so young, and more than 10 years can blur a lot of details. But from what I do remember, and from what people have told me, he was a talented, complicated, loving person. And I know my mom meant a lot to him. So I still think about that day sometimes. Maybe it was just an old car finally deciding to work. Or maybe, in his own quiet way, my grandfather was saying goodbye. Something really strange happened to me last night, and I've been turning it over in my head ever since. I almost didn't share it because even saying it out loud makes it feel heavier somehow. But I don't know. I think I just need to get it out. So last night, I was sleeping on the rooftop. That probably sounds odd to some people, but for me, it's normal. I've done it every summer since I was a kid. The nights get warm, the roof feels open and peaceful, and usually, it's the easiest place for me to fall asleep. Nothing strange has ever happened up there before. Sometime late in the night, maybe around 1:30 or 2 in the morning, I woke up for a few seconds. I didn't have my phone with me, so I just looked up at the sky, trying to guess how close it was to morning. It was still dark, so I lay back down and slowly drifted off again. That's when I had the dream. In the dream, I was sitting at my computer, working from home, already irritated and tired. For the past few days, the milk we had been getting seemed wrong somehow. Thin, watered down, not the usual quality. I remember feeling annoyed enough that I had decided I was going to confront the milkman the next time he came. I was sitting there waiting for him, almost rehearsing what I was going to say. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming up toward my room, and in the dream, I immediately thought, okay, that must be him. But when I looked over, it wasn't the current milkman. It was our old milkman, Ramesh. He had delivered milk to our house for years, maybe 11 or 12 years. He knew everyone in the neighborhood, and the thing is, he died last year. He took his own life. In the dream, he was climbing the stairs slowly, holding the milk in his hands, and the whole time, he was looking straight at me. Not just looking, really. Staring. He had this strange little smile on his face, almost like he already knew what I was thinking. Like instead of me confronting him, he was the one coming to confront me. I remember feeling frozen. I couldn't speak. I just watched him come closer, step by step. Then he reached the final stair, still smiling at me, and I woke up. For a moment, I just lay there on the rooftop, trying to breathe normally. I looked around, looked at the sky again, and told myself it was only a dream. A disturbing one, yes, but still just a dream. And honestly, I was starting to calm down. But then, right as I was drifting back to sleep, I heard a voice. It was a woman's voice. Very sharp, very high-pitched, and very clear. It said, "Ruko." Stop. I opened my eyes immediately. I was alone. There was no one beside me, no one on the rooftop, no one near the stairs. The whole place was quiet. I sat there for a while just listening, waiting for another sound, but nothing came. That's the part I can't explain. Maybe it was my brain stuck halfway between sleep and waking. Maybe it was just the dream echoing in my mind. I know that can happen. I know there are ordinary explanations for strange things at night. But it felt real. Not dream real. Real real. And the timing is what bothers me most. Right after dreaming about him, I hear a voice telling me to stop. My mother had told me before not to talk too much about him because his death wasn't natural. She doesn't like when people bring him up. And today, when I told my brother what happened, he got upset with me too. He told me not to keep mentioning people who died that way, not to talk about seeing them in dreams, because according to him, speaking about them can somehow draw them closer. He even said, "What if he's somewhere nearby?" I don't know what I believe. I really don't. Part of me thinks it was just my tired mind creating something out of fear and memory. Another part of me keeps replaying that voice, the way it cut through the silence. I don't really have anyone around me I can talk to about this without them either getting scared or angry. So I guess I'm sharing it here because I needed to tell someone. And there's one more thing that makes it harder to brush off. It's May now. He died in May of last year. Almost exactly 1 year ago. This happened a long time ago, back when I was about 12. For a little context, I read tarot cards. I wouldn't exactly call myself a medium, but I've definitely had more spiritual experiences than most people I know. I started learning tarot around that age, and the deck I use is actually a family heirloom. It was passed down to me when I was 12. Another thing that's important is that, before this, I had never really had nightmares. Not as a little kid, not as a toddler, not even once that I can remember. So one afternoon, I decided to take a nap in my room. In the dream, I was with two of my friends in my cousin's bedroom, except something was wrong right away. The whole room was reversed. The bed was on the opposite side. The furniture was flipped around. Everything looked familiar, but completely out of place. Then we heard this loud thud outside the window. So, of course, we went to look. The window was strange too. It had 3 layers to open: the regular glass, then the screen, then another pane of glass. When we finally got it open, I realized I didn't recognize anything outside. We were high up, like we were in an apartment building, surrounded by other tall buildings. But my cousin doesn't live in an apartment, which made it even more unsettling. It was nighttime outside, and the street was barely lit. Only a couple of faded streetlights were working. Down the road, though, there was this small, suburban-looking house, completely out of place against all the city buildings. It reminded me of a cartoon house, with a little walkway and a fence made from short logs and tree stump posts. On the walkway stood a shadowy man. He had this very strict, stern, father-like energy. Near him was a smaller shadow figure, a boy, standing on one of the tree stumps and playing with a jump rope. The second my friends and I saw them, we ducked back inside and panicked. When we looked out again, the whole scene had changed. The man was holding the jump rope the way an angry parent might hold a belt, and the boy was standing still with his head down. That scared us even more, so we slammed the window shut. Then something hit the glass. I don't remember what it was, only the sound and the feeling of knowing something was very wrong. After that, the dream shifted, almost like a movie cutting to another scene. Suddenly, I was on the phone with my friends. One of them, Mia, said, "I have to say goodbye to my family before it happens." Then my other friend said, "I'm going to hide in the woods. I'm not going out like this." And I remember panicking and saying, "What about me? What am I supposed to do?" Then I woke up sweating. I was terrified. I knew it had just been a dream, but I had never had a nightmare before, so it felt wrong in a way I can't really explain. I wanted to get out of bed, but I was too scared to move. Then I felt my cat sit on the bed near my feet. She was a big cat, and she slept with me all the time, so I knew what her weight felt like. I thought, okay, she's here. I'm not alone. So I sat up to grab her. But she wasn't there. There was just a dip in the mattress, like something invisible was sitting on the bed. I froze, then lay back down immediately. A moment later, one of my crystals near my tarot cards suddenly moved. I heard it hit the ceramic plate it was sitting on. It made this clear little ding, sharp and unmistakable. That was enough for me. I ran out of my room and found my mom. And the strangest part is, around that time, I used to see a shadow figure in my neighbor's attic window. Their house was a blue suburban home with one window right up at the peak of the roof. From my bed, the angle lined up perfectly. My window, my screen, and then their attic window. It felt eerily similar to the house I had seen in the dream. That's still one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had, though I do have others. And yes, I actually have a picture of the figure in the window. I'll be honest with you. I've always been somewhere in the middle when it comes to the paranormal. I wouldn't say I was a full believer, but I wasn't exactly a skeptic either. I liked horror movies. I could watch the based on a true story ones, read strange experiences online, and still go to bed just fine afterward. I never had anything happen to me directly. That changed a few nights ago. I had just gotten home from a weekend fishing trip with a couple of friends. It was around early afternoon, and I was completely worn out. You know the kind of tired where your body feels hollow? That was me. I barely slept the whole weekend, so all I wanted was a shower, dinner, and a real night of sleep. When I got home, my wife Lena was excited to show me what she had found at this little antique shop downtown. She had picked up a few things: some old glass plates, a silk scarf, a carved wooden box, and then this purse. It was old, really old looking. The purse was made from this deep, burgundy, reptile-textured material with a tarnished brass chain for the strap. It looked like something that had been sitting in the back of someone's closet for decades. And the strange thing was, it didn't seem like Lena at all. She usually likes simple, elegant bags. Clean lines, soft colors, nothing too dramatic. So when she told me she paid $85 for it, I was surprised. But she was so happy with it, and I didn't want to dampen that. So I told her it was interesting and that I liked it. The rest of the day was normal. I unpacked, we made dinner, cleaned up a little, watched TV, and eventually got ready for bed. Lena falls asleep fast. I mean, within minutes. I'm the opposite. I usually scroll on my phone for a while until I feel myself drifting. That night, she was already asleep beside me. I was lying on my side, facing her, phone in hand. It was warm in the room, and our dog, Milo, who usually sleeps on the bed with us, had chosen the hardwood floor near the doorway instead. It was around 11:40 at night when I finally put my phone down. I rolled onto my back, ready to sleep. And that's when I saw her. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The room wasn't completely dark, but it was dim enough that my eyes needed a second to adjust. There was a woman's head hovering just above me, maybe a foot or so from my face. I can still see it so clearly. Her hair was thin and tangled, hanging in uneven strands around her face. Her skin was old and wrinkled, but it wasn't just age that made her frightening. It was her expression. Her mouth was slightly open. Her upper lip was curled, almost like a snarl. Her nose was wrinkled up, and her eyes were wide, bulging, and fixed with this hateful intensity. But she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Lena. That was the worst part. The absolute worst part. It felt like this woman was leaning over me from the side of the bed, bent at some impossible angle, looking past me at my wife with this awful, vicious focus. I don't know how long I actually looked at her. It felt stretched out, like time had gone syrup thick. But I must have reacted almost instantly, because the next thing I knew, I threw myself toward Lena and practically climbed over her. She woke up terrified, asking me what was wrong. She turned on her lamp, and when she saw my face, she went quiet for a second. Then she said, "I have never seen you look like that before." And I believe her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I could barely speak at first. When I finally told her what I saw, I described the woman, the face, the way she appeared over me. But I left out one detail. I didn't tell Lena the woman had been staring directly at her. I just couldn't. She was already scared enough. We stayed awake for about an hour after that, trying to make sense of it. I kept telling myself maybe I had been half asleep. Maybe it was some kind of waking dream. But I knew what I saw. And the room felt wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. The air felt heavy. Not just emotionally, but physically. Like the room had pressure in it. At one point, I got up to use the bathroom, and walking felt strange, almost like I was moving through water. I felt disconnected from myself, like I was watching my own body move. When I got back into bed, I was exhausted, but every time I started to drift off, this sharp feeling would hit me, like something terrible was about to happen right then. It jolted me awake 3 or 4 times before I finally managed to fall asleep. A few hours later, around 3:15 in the morning, Milo woke us up. He was growling. Not barking at the window, not reacting to a sound outside. He was standing at the foot of the bed, trembling and staring toward the corner of the room. At the purse. The antique purse Lena had bought earlier was sitting on a chair near the dresser. Milo wouldn't go near it. He just stared at it, whining under his breath, with his body low and tense. And that's when something clicked for both of us. We didn't say much. We just got up, took the purse out of the bedroom, and put it downstairs near the front door. After that, we managed to sleep until morning. When we woke up, Lena told me she'd had a nightmare after we went back to bed. She dreamed she got up in the middle of the night and looked out our bedroom window. Across the way, she saw our neighbor standing in his window, staring back at her. In the dream, they just stared at each other. Then he raised a gun to his own head. She said it felt so real that when she woke up, she wasn't even sure it had been a dream. The next morning, I went to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called a friend of mine, Daniel, who has always been into paranormal stuff. I told him everything. He listened quietly, then said, "You need to get that purse out of your house." He told me he thought something negative was attached to it, and that whatever it was, it didn't want Lena to have it. He said to return it if possible, and then cleanse the house. The antique shop wasn't supposed to open again for 2 days, but Lena didn't want that purse in the house for another minute. She drove it back and left it by the shop's front door. She didn't care about the money. Neither did I. When she came home, she opened the windows, cleaned the house, and burned sage through every room. That night, I'll admit, I was still scared. I couldn't tell if the house still felt strange or if my nerves were just shredded. Lena felt the same way. We got into bed, but neither of us wanted silence, so we put on old comedy movies and let them play until we finally fell asleep sometime after 1 in the morning. Nothing happened that night. No footsteps, no strange feeling, no growling, no woman. I'm hoping that was the end of it. I don't know exactly what we brought into the house with that purse, and honestly, I don't think I want to know. But I know this much. Before that night, I could laugh off stories like this. I could tell myself people were tired, dreaming, imagining things. Now I understand how quickly one moment can change what you believe. And if something ever feels wrong the second it enters your home, listen to that feeling. Some things aren't meant to be brought inside. When we first moved into that apartment, I honestly didn't think anything of it. It was old, sure, and it had that quiet, heavy feeling some older places have. But I told myself I was just being dramatic. You know how it is when you're in a new house and every sound feels louder than it should. The apartment had 3 floors. My sisters and I stayed on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor was almost never used. It was supposed to be more like storage, but nobody really liked going up there. The air always felt colder, and the whole space had this stillness that made you want to finish whatever you were doing and leave. Our bedroom faced the backyard, and right outside the window there was this huge old tree. During the day, it looked harmless. Just a big tree with thick branches and a wide trunk. But at night, it changed completely. The branches stretched across the yard in these strange shapes, and when the wind moved them, the shadows looked almost alive. At first, we laughed it off. Every old place has something creepy about it, right? But then the neighbors started saying things. Nothing direct, nothing clear. Just little comments like, "That place has a history," or "People don't usually stay there very long." They never explained what they meant, but the way they said it made me feel uneasy. And honestly, looking back, I think that was probably why the rent was so low. For the first couple of weeks, nothing happened. No strange noises, no weird footsteps, nothing. We unpacked, studied, adjusted to the place, and tried to ignore that uncomfortable feeling that seemed to linger in certain corners of the apartment. Then one night, everything changed. My sisters and I were studying late for exams. We each had our own little study table, and mine was near the window facing the backyard and that huge tree. After a while, my sisters got too tired and went to sleep, but I stayed awake because I still had a few chapters to finish. It must have been around 2 or 3 in the morning when I looked outside, just to rest my eyes for a second. And that's when I saw her. There was a woman walking slowly along the road. At first, I thought maybe I was tired and imagining it. But no, she was there. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant, and she was wearing a long blue dress that almost touched the ground. Her walk was strange, slow, careful, quiet in a way that didn't feel normal. I remember thinking, why would someone like that be outside at this hour? But I tried to push it out of my mind. I told myself maybe she lived nearby. Maybe she couldn't sleep. Maybe she was just taking a walk. Still, something about her felt wrong. The next night, it happened again. I was exhausted and already thinking about going to bed. But for some reason, something made me look outside. I don't even know why. I just turned my head toward the window. It was 2:45 in the morning, and there she was again. This time, I saw her more clearly. Her dress wasn't plain blue like I thought before. It had a faded floral pattern, with tiny pale blue flowers scattered across the fabric. Parts of it were darker, almost like shadows had sunk into the cloth. It looked old, like something from another time. One of her hands was resting over her stomach, holding it gently, protectively, as she walked. Her hair was long, thick, and black, falling all the way down her back. I froze at my desk. Then she stopped, just suddenly stopped walking. And slowly, too slowly, she turned her head toward my window. She looked directly at me. I knew she saw me. My whole body went cold. Her eyes looked dark and empty, like there was nothing behind them. I can't even explain the feeling properly. It wasn't just fear. It was sadness too. Deep, heavy sadness. I shut the window immediately and went straight to bed. But that night, I had a dream. In the dream, I saw a woman who looked happy. She was pregnant, smiling, standing beside a man who seemed to be her husband. She was wearing the same dress, but in the dream, it looked new, bright, beautiful, like it belonged to a happier version of her life. Then everything changed. Her husband left her. Just like that, the dream turned dark. The happiness disappeared, and suddenly I saw the same tree from our backyard. And somehow, even in the dream, I understood what happened next. She had taken her own life there. But what stayed with me most wasn't just the fear. It was the guilt she carried. This terrible sorrow, like she blamed herself because her baby never got the chance to live. And the strangest part was, it felt like someone was trying to tell me something. Not with words, just with that sadness. Like she needed someone to know. I've been feeling really frustrated with my life lately. Some days, it honestly feels like everything about me is wrong. I look at my face and I don't feel good about it. I don't feel confident in my body, my hair, or even my voice. I feel unlucky, and when it comes to love, I feel like I always end up losing. There have been moments where I've wondered why I was even born. But what hurts more is that my life wasn't always like this. A couple of years ago, things felt so much better. Some of my best memories were from my hostel days in Lucknow. Life felt lighter back then. I had good moments, good energy, and at least for a while, I felt like I was actually living. Then things slowly started changing. There was a girl I had feelings for. I'll call her Ria, because I don't want to use her real name. For some reason, her name always felt connected to mine, almost like life was giving me some kind of sign. I know that might sound strange, but at that time, that's how it felt to me. Around the end of April 2025, everything began to feel disturbed. I met with an accident and fractured my leg. From that day onward, something inside me changed. I started feeling like my life was falling apart, like it wasn't worth much anymore. After that, I felt like certain people had entered my life and started troubling me. I still don't fully understand who they were, why I felt that way, or when it really began. But at the time, it felt very real to me. I started feeling like I was being tortured physically, almost like I was being made to experience pain again and again. It felt similar to accidents or injuries happening repeatedly. I couldn't explain how it was happening, but I kept feeling like my body was being affected. Then, on 18 May 2025, I proposed to Rhea. She said no. That rejection hit me very hard. I had used drugs once or twice before with friends, but I had stopped. After she rejected me, I slipped back into drugs heavily. I wasn't in a stable place mentally, and everything started feeling darker and more confusing. Around that time, I began believing that the people troubling me were not normal. I felt like they were hiding something from me, like maybe they weren't even human, or like they had some kind of control over the situations around me. I know that sounds unbelievable now, but back then, it felt completely real in my mind. I also started feeling like my voice had changed in a strange way. I felt like when I spoke, people reacted differently, almost in a sexual way. I know it sounds odd, and even I don't know how to explain it properly, but that was something I genuinely felt at the time. Later, I started thinking a lot about Nazar, or the evil eye. I began believing that if I was impure, something bad would happen to me physically, and if I stayed pure, things might become better. For example, I thought that if someone gave me the evil eye on my face might become darker or get marks. Once, after talking to someone for a long time, I got into an accident and ended up with a mark on my face. I connected that incident to the evil eye. I also started connecting injuries on different parts of my body to the same idea. I know it sounds difficult to believe, but that was honestly how my mind was working during that period. This phase lasted for about 4 months, from April to August. Around the beginning of August, maybe on the 1st or 2nd, I started realizing that something was seriously wrong. At one point, I felt like these people were fooling me by pretending to be news channels, like BBC, or even pretending to be my relatives and family members. I was also using drugs during that time, so my mind was not clear at all. I even wrote notes saying I would become famous. I felt like I was communicating with them through my thoughts. Later, I started feeling like thoughts were being placed into my mind, making me believe all kinds of things, even things connected to my brother or my grandmother's soul. My grandmother passed away 7 years ago, and I was very emotionally attached to her. So when thoughts about her came into my mind, they affected me deeply. Over time, I started realizing that some of these things might not have been real. But even then, I stayed confused because of the drugs, the stress, and the mental pressure I was under. I also felt like I was being given dates and promises, like everything would stop on a certain day. But nothing really ended. That made me feel even more trapped. For a long time, repeated sounds also disturbed me. Coughing, spitting, small noises, ordinary sounds around me. All of it started feeling targeted. I know some of those sounds are normal, but to me, they felt continuous, personal, and painful. During this same period, bad things kept happening in my life. My bike ran out of petrol near a closed petrol station. Then another station had no petrol either. Small, unlucky incidents like that kept piling up. A lot of my electronic things also stopped working in a short time. Chargers, PC parts, extension boards, and other items. Even my mother once said something like, "If you touch something, it becomes weak or breaks." That stayed in my mind, and it made me feel even more unlucky. Now I feel like everything around me goes wrong. I feel like I carry bad luck with me. I tried telling my family and some friends, but they didn't really take me seriously. Some of them thought I was joking. That hurt too, because inside, I wasn't joking at all. I was scared, confused, and tired. Right now, I feel very low and alone. The girl I cared about doesn't want me anymore. I feel like I can't do anything properly, even when I want to. Sometimes I'm afraid to go outside because I feel like things might get worse. I've never intentionally tried to hurt anyone. I don't feel like I've done something so wrong that I deserve all of this. But still, this is how my life feels right now. And honestly, I don't know what to do anymore. I was 19 when I finally started talking about this more openly, but the first time it happened, I was only about 12. I was at my grandparents' house one evening, sitting on the couch with my older sister, Mara, right beside me. I had my laptop open, just doing whatever kids do online at that age, not paying much attention to anything else. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something near the bookshelf by the staircase. It looked like a person, but not really. More like a completely black shape. Its head was rounded in this strange way, almost like a smudged thumbprint. It looked like it was wearing clothes that reminded me of one of my aunt's outfits, and there was something around its neck. A rope. It was hanging there. I looked up so fast, but when I stared directly at the spot, there was nothing there. The second I looked back down at my laptop, though, I could see it again. Same place, same shape, just hanging near the stairs. I turned toward Mara, absolutely terrified, and before I even got a word out, she said, "Do not tell me there's something beside me." That made my stomach drop. I told her, "No, it's not beside you," and then I asked if she could see anything near the bookshelf. She looked, but she said she didn't see anything. Then she told me to go tell our grandmother. So I did. But while I was trying to explain it to my grandma, I saw another figure. This one was standing between my uncle and my grandfather. It looked just like the first one, only this time, the clothes reminded me of something my dad would wear. My grandma didn't laugh. She didn't tell me I was imagining it. She immediately went upstairs, came back with rosary beads, and told me to pray. That reaction scared me almost as much as what I saw. A few years after that, my grandfather had serious back problems and ended up needing surgery. Around that same period, my uncle developed a tumor behind his eye and needed surgery too. I'm not saying those things were definitely connected, because I honestly don't know. But after what I saw, it's hard not to wonder. It just stayed in the back of my mind, like a cold hand on my shoulder. Then, when I was around 16, something else happened. My grandparents asked me to go into the garage and grab a bottle of wine. I didn't think anything of it. I walked over, opened the door, and flipped on the light. The lights flickered for a second, and in that flicker, I saw a man standing right in front of me. He was so close to my face that I jumped back immediately. He had a tall top hat, and he seemed broad, almost unnaturally large, though I could only really see him from the shoulders up. He was just there, inches away from me. I looked over at Mara, and the look on her face told me she knew. She knew exactly what I had seen. I ran back inside and started praying to God and Jesus because I didn't know what else to do. After a little while, I came back and sat beside my sister. She looked at me and asked, "Did you see that man too?" I said yes. That was when she told me she had seen the same man a few weeks before in the same house. We told our grandma again, and eventually she had a priest come bless the house. The strangest part is that it only ever happened to me and Mara. Nobody else in the family saw these things. Not my grandparents, not my parents, not my uncle, just us. And what still confuses me is that all of this seemed to start around the time I became more serious about my faith. I was praying more, believing more deeply in God, and trying to understand spiritual things in a real way. I still believe in God. I still pray. But I also still don't know what my sister and I saw in that house. And even now, years later, I think about it and wonder whether anyone else has experienced something like this, or whether there's any explanation for what was standing in front of us that night. I'm going to tell you something that still feels difficult to say out loud. People talk about the afterlife as the place we go when this life ends. Others talk about the end of days, the Antichrist, a being who brings pain, war, and darkness wherever they go. But what if evil doesn't always arrive looking like a monster? What if it hides inside someone innocent? Someone who never asked to be chosen? My name is Mira. I'm 17 years old, and since the day I was born, my life has never fully belonged to me. When I was a baby, I became terribly sick. My family says I died for a few minutes. The doctors didn't know what to do, and when I came back, I wasn't really the same. I could breathe, but I couldn't walk. I couldn't speak. I couldn't look at anyone. For almost 5 years, I lived in a wheelchair, trapped inside a body that felt empty to everyone around me. But my mother never gave up. She took me to hospitals, churches, temples, healers, and rituals. She tried everything a desperate mother might try to save her child. But during one of those rituals, something went wrong. Or maybe it went too well. When I was 6 years old, something exploded inside my head. It felt like thunder had cracked open behind my eyes. My ears rang, my nose started bleeding, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I could walk. I could speak. I could run and jump like my body had only been waiting for permission to come back to life. The doctors had no explanation. They ran every test they could think of, but everything came back clean. My mother cried with relief, but I could still see something hidden in her eyes. A question. A fear she didn't want to name. A year later, on my 7th birthday, I heard a voice. It was deep and heavy, like it came from somewhere ancient. "Wake up, Mira. The time to fight has come." I tried to scream, but strange words came out of my mouth. Words I didn't understand. My mother rushed into the room, and when she saw me, she froze. My hands were white. My nails had turned gray. My face was cold, almost lifeless. She carried me to the hospital. The doctors called specialists. They even brought in a translator who said I seemed to be speaking a strange mixture of Aramaic and Old Latin. Then one doctor looked at my mother and said something I'll never forget. "Ma'am, you need to look for help beyond medicine. This is not something we understand." A few days later, I started speaking English again, as if nothing had happened. But something inside me had already awakened. Years passed, and I tried to live like a normal girl. I went to school. I studied hard. I stayed quiet. I did everything I could to seem ordinary. Then, when I was 17, I was sitting in sociology class. We were talking about war, about how it destroys families, about children who lose everything before they're old enough to understand why. Then I saw a photo of a wounded little boy, and something inside me cracked. Pain tore through my head. My ears rang so loudly I thought they would burst. Blood poured from my nose. My eyes burned. Then I felt something enormous and dark moving inside my chest. The voice came back. "It is time." I wanted to call for help, but only unfamiliar words came out. Then I fainted. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. I was speaking, but no one understood me. No one except an older man who entered the room with a strange calmness. He looked like a priest, but not exactly. He read my medical history. He listened to the words coming from my mouth. Then he turned to my mother and said, "Your daughter is not possessed in the way you think. She is a bridge." My mother didn't understand, so he continued. "There are three forces inside her: heaven, hell, and earth. Her body is the earth. The light that brought her back came from God. But during the rituals, something dark entered too. Now both are fighting inside her." My mother argued with him. She cried. She begged him not to say those things. Then the man took out an old book filled with symbols I didn't recognize, and for the first time, I saw my mother look at me with real fear. Not fear of me, fear for me. Not long after that, they told me I had to go to Rome. They said the Vatican would become my new home. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to abandon my school, my house, my life. But everyone spoke as though there was no choice. Maybe there wasn't. When we arrived, they brought me to a sealed chamber, cold and silent. The moment I stepped inside, something changed. The anger that sometimes burned inside me faded a little. The pain my mother carried, the pain that had somehow been feeding something in me, grew quieter. The fear around me no longer made me stronger. It only made me sad. The priest looked at me and said, "This room is not here to cure you, Mira. It is here to help you control what lives inside you." I didn't understand. So he came closer and spoke gently. "When you died, a spark of God entered you. But when your family tried to save you at any cost, a shadow attached itself to that light. You are not only a girl. You are the meeting point between heaven, hell, and the human world." He told me that when I turn 33, one of those forces will fully awaken. The light or the darkness. And everything I do before then will decide whether I become salvation or destruction. So here I am. My name is Mira. I'm 17 years old. And I have 16 years left to control what lives inside me, before it controls me. Honestly, I need some advice, because I'm still trying to make sense of everything. I was with my ex Clara for almost 5 years. It was one of those relationships where you think you've built something solid, something that could actually last. But during a trip, she cheated on me. She said it was just a kiss, like that somehow made it smaller. But for me, it broke something. I tried to forgive her for almost a year. I really did. I tried to convince myself that love could get past it, that maybe time would dull the pain, that I could stop replaying it in my head. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, there was this weight in my chest. So eventually, I ended the relationship. About a year and a half passed. I hadn't used my ChatGPT account in ages. Honestly, I had almost forgotten about it. Then one day, I logged in randomly and saw that she had still been using my account. And what made it worse was that she had been using it for things related to her and her new boyfriend, like photos and stuff like that. I got angry, so I messaged her. I think I only wanted to confront her. But then she suddenly started crying, and somehow, I did too. It was strange. It felt like everything we had buried came rushing back at once. She told me she missed me, and that same day, we agreed to meet somewhere nearby. We saw each other. We talked. We kissed. It was confusing and intense, like opening a door both of us had sworn was already locked. But I told her we should talk later, calmly, and see what happened. A week later, we met again. That's when she told me she couldn't do this to her boyfriend. She said she couldn't be with me while she was still with him. And inside, I knew she was right. I didn't want to become that kind of person. I had already been hurt by cheating, and I didn't want to do the same thing to someone else, even if I didn't know him. I still have values, or at least I'm trying to hold on to them. But even after that, we kept seeing each other. For one reason or another, we kept talking, crossing paths, finding excuses. Then one day, I got fed up. I brought her some things of hers that I still had, left them with her, and we agreed not to talk or see each other anymore. A couple of days later, I left the gym and passed near her university. She came up to me like nothing had happened and said, "Give me luck." I asked her, "Isn't your boyfriend here?" She said yes, that he was probably in the classroom. His classroom was close to the entrance, maybe only a few meters away. So he was right there, almost within sight, and he had no idea. She asked me for luck for her exams. Like an idiot, I said okay. She scratched my hands, because apparently that was supposed to bring luck. And then, being even more foolish, I told her she had to give it back to me later. That's how we ended up seeing each other again that Sunday. We met at a park. We hugged, talked for a while, and then out of nowhere, she started crying. By then, we had already seen each other several times over those 2 weeks. At one point, she told me she had confessed everything to her boyfriend. That we had kissed, that we had met, that we had hugged. She said he cried a lot, but forgave her. And I believed her. But that Sunday, when we were saying goodbye, she said something that made me go completely cold. She told me she had been crying because of her boyfriend, not because of me. I didn't understand. I still don't fully understand. But in that moment, I told myself, enough. I left, and I stopped talking to her. After that, I decided to find her boyfriend and tell him what had happened. I don't think I did it out of revenge. At least, I hope I didn't. I did it because I felt like he deserved to know the truth. When I told him, I could see the pain in his face. His eyes started to water. Then she appeared, but I didn't even turn to look at her. I just told him, "That's everything. Take care." And I left. That happened in June 2025. Since then, I felt strange. I don't really know how to explain it. It's like things haven't been flowing the same way, like I've been carrying this heavy energy around, or like I've had bad luck following me. And that feels weird because I've always thought of myself as a lucky person, almost like I had a 4-leaf clover stamped on my forehead. A few months ago, I started feeling like something was off. I even started wondering if it could be something like witchcraft, even though I know that sounds dramatic. Then recently, I was deleting things from my phone and opened TikTok, which I barely use. I realized I was still following her, so I went to her profile to unfollow her. That's when I saw some strange videos. Things like, "Never make a witch cry," and other posts with that same kind of energy. They were from around December 2025, which is roughly when I started feeling weird. And of course, my mind started connecting dots, even though maybe it was just my pain trying to turn confusion into a pattern. She's still with her boyfriend, even though she cheated on him with me. And before that, she cheated on me too. I honestly don't know how someone can live with that so calmly. I couldn't. That year of trying to forgive her left me bitter, exhausted, and broken inside. So now I don't know what to think. I don't know if I need a cleansing, therapy, real closure, or just to stop looking for signs in places where there might only be wounds that haven't healed yet. And yeah, part of me jokes that maybe I should travel back to the 1600s and deal with the witch myself. But seriously, I need help. What would you do if you were in my place?